The music world was shocked by the passing of the Cranberries' lead singer Dolores O'Riordan on January 15, 2018. She was only 46 years old when her body was found in a London hotel. You know her voice, you know her songs. So here's a look at what you might not know about her and the legacy she left behind. Country girl. Despite her fame and rock star status, O'Riordan told The Telegraph in 2001 she was most at peace in rural Ireland. She described her cozy, loving childhood, her close relationship with her mother, and her thoughts on the rock star life, saying, "I don't want to be a part of the Hollywood scene or the New York scene. I just want to be a part of my family scene. I don't want to get into a clique of people that I suddenly feel I have to have an identity with. I have a real identity with a beautiful family I really know and really love." She talked about her piece of paradise, too. A house outside Limerick with a cottage for her mother, complete with horses, a pot-bellied pig, a flock of chickens, her dogs, and the peacocks the family raised. Politics. While not nearly as openly political as fellow Irish singer-songwriter Sinead O'Connor, O'Riordan occasionally expressed her political opinions to the press. In a 1995 interview, she told Rolling Stone she thought abortions were demeaning to women. "I'm in no position to judge other women, you know. But I mean, idiot, why didn't you not get pregnant? It's not good for women to go through the procedure. It belittles women." In 2009, she allowed her music to be used in a movie called South Dakota, A Woman's Right to Choose, an anti-abortion film that's part documentary and part feature, telling the story of two pregnant teens and the decisions they made. O'Riordan also moderated a post-screening panel for an audience of hundreds of teenage girls. When the Los Angeles Times covered the panel, they said O'Riordan stayed neutral while encouraging the girls to speak up about how they felt without fear of being judged. In 2014, O'Riordan was a mentor on The Voice of Ireland and told The Independent before the finale that she didn't have any chemistry with the show's other female mentor. She believed there was one key difference between them. "I'm a feminist and she's not. Someone who uses their sexuality to be heard or to be seen or get attention. I don't think you need to do that. I think women should be equal." But O'Riordan didn't always consider herself a feminist. In 2001, she told The Telegraph, "I think the feminists probably need some serious man in their lives." Facing her demons. In 2015, O'Riordan pleaded guilty to charges filed following an incident that started on a flight from New York to Ireland and continued at the airport. O'Riordan was allegedly physically and verbally abusive with the flight crew, acting belligerent and shouting, "I'm an icon. I'm the Queen of Limerick." When police arrived at the airport, she reportedly headbutted one officer and spit at another. O'Riordan's mother, Eileen, told the Limerick Leader it wasn't drugs or alcohol that triggered her daughter's outburst, but stress from the end of her 20-year marriage, which she alluded to in a 2013 interview.
And you've been together, what, 18 years or something? Married 18 years?
Yeah, we're married 18 this year, so yeah, there's a bit of hope. And we haven't really killed each other yet, only patient.
O'Riordan was placed in psychiatric care following the incident, and the judge ordered her to apologize to the crew and the police in writing and donate €6,000 to charity. O'Riordan's friend Barry Egan wrote a piece for the Belfast Telegraph after the airport drama that tried to explain why, failing marriage aside, she was in such a dark place. Egan wrote that O'Riordan confessed to him in 2013 that she was sexually abused by a man for 4 years when she was a little girl. She kept the secret buried for a long time, but had to face it in 2011 when her father lost his 7-year battle with cancer, and she came face to face with her abuser at his funeral. She said the man apologized for what he did to her. O'Riordan says the abuse she suffered as a child had a major impact on her as an adult. At the same time, she struggled to come to terms with her newfound fame. She fought to manage the depression that led to her thoughts of self-harm, anorexia, alcoholism, insomnia, and panic attacks. She also shared that in 2012, things got so bad she tried to overdose. When that failed, she reassessed her life, citing her kids as a reason to live. O'Riordan was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2015. Believer. O'Riordan frequently talked about the values instilled in her during her childhood, which the Telegraph called old-fashioned, romantic, and Catholic. O'Riordan herself told the Irish Independent she believes in God and an afterlife, adding, "I believe in other dimensions. When people die, they go to another dimension, and we can communicate with them." She said part of her beliefs came from her experience saying goodbye to her father, and added he regularly came to her in dreams where she spoke with him. Secure legacy. When she talked to the Telegraph in 2001 about her legacy, she said it was one she was proud of. "When I die, I'll have a massive catalog of beautiful songs behind me. I'm proud I wrote Linger. I'm proud I wrote Dreams. I love it when I hear people doing cover versions of my songs. I'm like, I wrote that. My God, I'm so proud of myself."
As drummer for the legendary Nirvana and frontman for the Foo Fighters, Dave Grohl has been one of the most important and influential figures in rock music for almost 3 decades. Yet, despite his fame, Grohl still sometimes manages to go under the radar. Here's a look at the untold truth of Dave Grohl.
Oh, what's that? A bell? Time for school.
Heartbreaker. After Nirvana broke up in 1994 following the tragic suicide of frontman Kurt Cobain, Grohl found himself in high demand, and he was soon offered an amazing job as the drummer for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. For his audition, Grohl played with the band on Saturday Night Live. No pressure. Naturally, Grohl killed it, but he decided to turn down the offer of a permanent position because he wanted to do his own music. It would prove to be the right choice. Solo artist. Following his brief stint with the Heartbreakers, Grohl went into the studio intending to record some demos for some songs he was working on. He came out with an entire album, playing every instrument on every song except for one guitar part on a solitary track. For the album, he even taught himself how to play the guitar in a unique fashion, translating the strings into their drum set equivalents. He told Rolling Stone, "The low E string is the kick drum, the A and D strings are snares, the G, B, and high E are the cymbals." Grohl originally intended for the songs to be released anonymously, but after he got a record deal, he decided to put the album out under the name Foo Fighters. Drum Master. Despite being one of the best drummers in the world, Grohl primarily sings and plays guitar in Foo Fighters. That means some poor guy has to play drums in front of Dave Grohl every day. At first, it was William Goldsmith, who Grohl hired onto the band when he realized he needed other people in order to perform his songs live. But in 1997, during the recording of the second Foo Fighters album, The Color and the Shape, Grohl became unhappy with Goldsmith's work, requiring the poor guy to record 96 takes for one song, and over 13 hours worth of takes on another. Even worse, all of that work got thrown out later when Grohl decided to just re-record the drums himself for almost the entire album. Understandably frustrated, Goldsmith quit the band and was later replaced by Taylor Hawkins, who is still in the group today.
Was it hard for you to give up being the drummer? I mean, a lot of people would say you're the best drummer of your generation in rock and roll.
Well, I disagree with that, but when you have a drummer like Taylor Hawkins in your band, I don't necessarily miss being the drummer because I have the greatest drummer in the world.
Bad behavior. Grohl has been married to his wife, Jordan Blum, since 2003, and they have 3 daughters together. His romantic life hasn't always been so rosy, however. He was in a high-profile relationship in 1998 with Louise Post of Veruca Salt, until he dumped her via long-distance phone call, simply because he wanted to hook up with Winona Ryder. What's sadder, Post got the call right before a Veruca concert, and she got so drunk she could barely play. Those bad romances came in the wake of Grohl's first marriage to Jennifer Youngblood, which ended in divorce in 1997 due to his infidelities. But it also led to a professional split. Foo Fighters guitarist Pat Smear is very good friends with Youngblood. When the divorce happened, he sided with Youngblood, so much so that he left the Foo Fighters, eventually reconciling with the band years later. Dave loves Dave. Foo Fighters are one of the few bands in recent memory that transcend genre or demographics. It seems like everybody loves them, even grumpy old David Letterman. In 2015, he invited the band to be the last ever musical guest on his last ever late night show. He had but one request: play their 1997 hits Everlong. So why the Foos, and why Everlong? Back in 2000, Letterman had open heart surgery. Afterwards, he had one request: he wanted the Foo Fighters to play his show. Fan favorites. As much as the fans love Grohl, he loves them right back. For example, in 2006, a pair of miners in Tasmania were trapped underground and sent a request to rescue workers to have an iPod full of Foo Fighters songs lowered to them. Grohl responded first with a heartfelt note, and then later by giving them free concert tickets and backstage passes to meet with him. He even wrote a song for them called Ballad of the Beaconsfield Miners, which appeared on the Foo Fighters album Echo, Silence, Patience and Grace. And in 2015, after a group of 1,000 Italian musicians playing the Foo Fighters hit Learning to Fly went viral, Grohl traveled to Italy to put on a show for them, and even brought some of them on stage to play the song with him. No love lost. After the death of Kurt Cobain and the end of Nirvana, there was no love lost between Grohl and Cobain's widow, Courtney Love. For 20 years, Grohl and Love took turns suing each other over the rights to Nirvana's music, while taking petty potshots at each other in public.
I've never written a song about him, so I'm going to sing you one right now.
Okay.
When the drummer tries to sing, everybody better hide. When the drummer tries to sing, God, let's all go inside. Oh yeah, all of you that love all things Foo. Dave, I have to tell you, Kurt hated you.
In recent years, though, the hostility has subsided, with the pair even embracing when Nirvana was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014.
I mean, look, if you can, give up a grudge like that, because there was a lot of crap
that went on. I think anyone could do it.
You wouldn't think a star as squeaky clean as Weird Al Yankovic would have anything to hide. And you're absolutely right. But since there's nothing scandalous about his career, Weird Al has avoided the harsh scrutiny of the media spotlight, meaning there are plenty of shocking facts about the musician you may not have heard until now.
Spend every weekend at the Renaissance Fair, got my name on my underwear.
Here's a look at the untold truth of Weird Al Yankovic. No relation. Given the shared last name and a mutual gift for the accordion, it'd be reasonable for anyone to presume that Weird Al Yankovic and America's polka king Frankie Yankovic are related. But while they're friends, they aren't actually family.
Frankie, there's been a British invasion. There's been a disco invasion. Do you think the country's ready for a polka invasion?
I think it's way overdue, Al, I'll be honest with you.
Weird Al explained in an interview that he's had a lot of trouble getting people to believe it. Sometimes after explaining to a reporter for the third time that Frankie wasn't my dad, I would read the article and it would say, there's obviously a rift in the Yankovic family. Al won't even admit that Frankie's his father. Academic genius. If Al's unique skill as a parodist had failed to turn into a lifetime gig, there's no question that he would have been smart enough to make his way in some other field. Al started kindergarten a year early, skipped second grade, and graduated from high school in Linwood, California at 16. He went on to attend California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, where he received his bachelor's degree in architecture. We could have had the next Frank Lloyd Wright. Instead, we got this.
Oh my, this here Anakin guy. Maybe Vader someday later, now he's just a small fry.
A debt to Michael. Weird Al is quick to acknowledge that he effectively owes his career to Michael Jackson, first for letting him parody Beat It as Eat It, and then letting him transform bad into fat.
He was always a great sport, had a terrific sense of humor. In fact, when we did the Fat video, that was actually Michael Jackson's Subway set. That was the one that he used for his Moonwalker long-form video. So he was always very accommodating and a fan of my work.
But Jackson also helped Al by not letting him parody one of his songs. He wanted to turn Black or White into Snack All Night because, of course, that's what he'd call it, but Jackson refused. Weird Al told Rolling Stone that Jackson thought it was more of a message song, and he didn't feel as comfortable with a parody of that one. Instead, Al decided to parody a new band called Nirvana. The resulting hit, Smells Like Nirvana, legitimized Al's act as more than just a one-note Michael Jackson parody. Tofu pot pie? Not every artist has been cool with Al parodying their tunes. For example, Paul McCartney didn't want Al to turn Live and Let Die into chicken pot pie.
Paul didn't want me to do it because he's a strict vegetarian, and he didn't want a parody that condoned the consumption of animal flesh. That was the whole thing. He said, no, you can do anything else you want. You can do like tofu pot pie.
But it was Prince who was most famous for turning down Al's requests, not once, but several times. Every single time, in fact. Al told People magazine that I had a parody of Let's Go Crazy that was about the Beverly Hillbillies, and I wanted to do something funny with When Doves Cry and Kiss. For 1999, I wanted to do an infomercial where you could get anything you wanted by dialing 1-800-something-1999. Oh, what might have been. Double Jeopardy. When Al released his parody of the Greg Kihn Band's Jeopardy! The game show had been absent from the airwaves for half a decade. The series was created by Merv Griffin, and after Al performed I Lost on Jeopardy! On Griffin's long-running talk show, the host gushed over the song's massive influence.
Al, what you've done for me, I can't tell you. That's right. With the great success, see, Jeopardy's my show. With the great success of that record, Jeopardy's coming back September of this year.
Yeah, that's great.
Hey!
Not bad for a guy who couldn't win a TV game show.
Losers, in other words.
Well...
Honorary Beach Boy. Legendary musician Brian Wilson's Sweet Insanity album abruptly disappeared from the Warner Brothers 1991 release schedule when the master tapes were supposedly stolen. Among the material lost, Let's Stick Together, featuring none other than Weird Al on accordion. Wilson didn't think the tapes being stolen was particularly a big loss. He told the Las Vegas Review-Journal that, "We thought that maybe people wouldn't like it, so we junked it." Judging by Weird Al's other Beach Boys-inspired work, that seems like a big mistake.
Don't you know you gotta flow, pancreatic juice.
Working without a net. Given how much it costs to insure actors these days, it's unlikely that we'll see a new version of Circus of the Stars anytime soon, but the former primetime staple used to be a thrilling bit of fun for viewers, particularly when the acts involved some danger.
This is a seriously dangerous act. Why you?
Well, I know they originally wanted Oprah Winfrey to do it, but I guess she was busy tonight or something, and I was kind of a last-minute replacement.
Al's act certainly qualifies. He sat, and occasionally even stood, atop a sway pole 55 feet in the air, with no safety net below him. Al revealed on his website that this was not trick photography. My manager says if he gets any more offers for me to be on Circus of the Stars, he's not going to tell me about them. Yeesh. Tragic loss. Stories don't get much sadder than the one about the death of Al's parents. On April 9, 2004, Nick and Mary Yankovic, aged 86 and 81 respectively, were found dead in their home, having accidentally succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning after starting a fire in the fireplace with the flue closed. Al's parents were familiar to his fans, having appeared in his mockumentary The Complete Al, as well as in his episode of VH1's Behind the Music, so the news of their death was startling and saddening. No one, however, was more shocked and devastated than Al himself, who inspired more than a few tears with his thoughtful statement about his parents' life and death. He's a director. When you've done as many videos as Al has, it makes sense you'd learn a few things about the directorial process, which may be why he decided to step behind the camera in 1986. Since then, Al has directed 14 videos for himself, including Amish Paradise, White and Nerdy, and Tacky. Not to mention videos for musical acts ranging from frequent collaborator Ben Folds to Hanson. Weird Al and Hanson? Not even close to the weirdest thing Al has done.
Bantha milk, so creamy and blue. Squeeze from a space yak, it's healthy for you. Hey!
Sorry, bub, not feeling that one. Got anything else?
Yeah, sure, here's a new one.
The number 27. Since his career began in earnest in the 80s, Al has had a habit of incorporating the number 27 into his videos, his album covers, and even his lyrics.
Doing a promotional stunt, there's a great big purple sign out front that says Andrew 27 customer will get a ball bean hammer free.
So is the number 27 significant at all, Al?
What are you doing?
This means something.
Al explained it all in an interview. I thought it was fairly obvious, but if you need me to explain it, it's the cube root of 19,683. Oh, well, that explains it.
Did you know that Slash is actually pretty shy in real life? Or that the guitar virtuoso also has a strange fondness for reptiles? Want to learn more about the Guns N' Roses Axeman? Keep watching. Slash was born in London in July 1965. Per Louder Sound, his family stayed in Stoke in the United Kingdom before they decided to move to the US. He was 6 years old at the time. Slash believed that his dad was always the black sheep in their family, someone who wanted to challenge stereotypes and carve his own path. He said, "My dad was the rebel of the family. He went to art school, married a black woman, and was part of the whole rock and roll scene. LA was the place to be, so moving there made perfect sense." Slash mentioned in an interview that he never looked at himself differently based on skin color. But he also added that he could identify with those who deal with racism thanks to his early experiences as a child. Slash recalled, "There was a certain fear of racial prejudice in my family. When I watch what other people are still going through, it's sad that we're still dealing with this thing." That said, he made it clear that he didn't consciously try to identify as black or British. He explained, "When I started doing my own thing, especially playing guitar, it wasn't so much of a thing. I never really cared to have to identify one way or another." Slash may have many fond memories from his childhood, but he also experienced terrible loneliness when he was little. According to a Rolling Stone piece, his parents decided to part ways in the 70s. Home was a bit uncertain, and things at school were even worse. He often ended up being on his own because he just could not identify with his peers. Also, he was shy, which made it harder for him to connect with others. He said, "I had long hair, and the schools I went to were filled with kids of bankers and real estate agents. It wasn't like any of them came from the same background I had." He was often thrown out of school, and things didn't look up for him until he started focusing on his skills as a guitarist. This helped him in a big way. His classmates were friendlier and more talkative around him because they knew that he could play the guitar. Per biography, Slash has been called a problem child in the past. He wasn't into education and would simply ignore it, focusing instead on BMX racing.
I got into BMX and I got heavily into it.
Music was a godsend for him, and it gave him a purpose. He was so hooked that he would easily play for at least 12 hours every day.
Did you teach yourself how to play?
Pretty much. I had a guitar teacher when I first started. I didn't know anything about guitars.
As a band, Guns N' Roses got into a fair amount of trouble in their early days when they released a song titled "One in a Million." The problem with this track was that it had racist and homophobic undertones. The lyrics made many listeners uncomfortable. Per Rolling Stone, Slash himself wasn't happy about releasing the song. He was able to view it from a different perspective on account of his own family background and knew that the song wasn't a great fit for their album. He spoke about his discomfort later and said that when Axl Rose first suggested the track, Slash was sure that he didn't like it. He added that Rose was pretty stubborn about going ahead with the track. However, Slash also said that he didn't regret working on the song, telling Rolling Stone, "I just regret what we've been through because of it, and the way people have perceived our personal feelings." Several years later, when the band re-released its album, Appetite for Destruction, the team decided to get rid of One in a Million. This launch was massive, and the album included 73 tracks, but One in a Million was ultimately removed on account of its offensive lyrics. For Slash, it has not been easy to drop his smoking habit. He was addicted to it for many years. Per The Telegraph, his ex-wife made him quit after the couple had a kid. He revealed that he decided to kick the habit when he was told that the baby was starting to smell, quote, like an ashtray. He managed to stay away from cigarettes for a year before he got back to smoking. The second time around, two things happened that had a major impact on him. He lost his mother to lung cancer and got pneumonia himself. He said, "And after I got sick, I had a cigarette in my hand and a lighter and I was about to smoke, and it just seemed really stubborn of me." Per the Huffington Post, Slash also said that he was smoking constantly when he was at a Cher concert before he got sick with pneumonia. After that, he ended up quitting for good. According to a Rolling Stone interview, Slash had a tough time when he collaborated with Michael Jackson for one of their projects. What bothered him was that their meetings were simply erratic and didn't have a fixed routine. Slash said, "I like to keep a schedule and be punctual. Those dates just sat there for months and months until I kept thinking they didn't want to use me anymore." He clarified that he genuinely admired Michael Jackson as a musician and had a lot of respect for him. Slash was a part of Jackson's album Dangerous. Once everything was said and done, working with Jackson was a learning experience in many ways for Slash, who believed that Jackson was, quote, musically fluid and very talented. He reflected, "I do some shows here and there, and it was fun because he was such a pro, and he was such a talent from on high." Slash and Axl Rose were a part of the original Guns N' Roses lineup and knew each other for a really long time. Per NME, their relationship was complicated, and the musicians didn't really interact with each other for around 2 decades after they had a falling out. Slash decided to step away from Guns N' Roses in 1996 at a time when the group was struggling with an unsuccessful album called The Spaghetti Incident. Many believed that Slash and Axl Rose were at odds and had many creative differences. Slash later said in his 2007 biography that Rose was a dominating figure who tried to drastically change the band and take full control, something that didn't work for him and eventually made him leave the band.
It took about 24 hours before I decided, I think this is the end of the line.
Slash said at the time, "Axl and I have not been capable of seeing eye to eye on Guns N' Roses for some time. We recently tried to collaborate, but at this point, I'm no longer in the band." He expressed hope that they would collaborate again together someday. They let go of their differences in 2015, though. According to Loudwire, Rose was the one who made the first move in a bid to bury the hatchet. Slash found it cathartic to speak to his old friend once more and reconnect. He acknowledged that they really did have a strong bond. According to biography, Slash has been through heartbreak a couple of times. He divorced his first wife, actress and model Renee Saran, in 1997. A few years later, he tied the knot with his second wife, Perla Farrar, in 2001. They even had 2 sons together. Things went awry in 2010, and they attempted to get a divorce before deciding to bury their differences. Per People, Farrar had been a great source of strength for him. Sadly, their relationship couldn't survive, and they ended up parting ways. The separation was ugly, though. According to The Blast, Farrar didn't make it easy to end the relationship. The musician wanted to get on with his life and declared that he was willing to shell out thousands of dollars in child support. He added that his kids would receive 1.8% of his earnings until 2036 and that Farrar would also benefit from spousal support. At this point, Slash simply needed a decision to be made. He said, "Perla has been slow responding, or has deliberately drawn out responding, throughout this matter. I want to move on with my life." As far as Slash is concerned, Most people don't know what he actually is like in real life. He told Rolling Stone that he is really shy and reticent and not comfortable in front of many people. Having his guitar and his trademark hat help him deal with his shyness a little. Despite being shy around people, the guitarist is a huge fan of reptiles and has taken care of many pets in his life. He said that he had 11 of them at one point. When one of his snakes died, he was really upset. Slash said, "Because he's been through so much with me, my whole career. I tried so hard to keep him alive, and he died. It was depressing because it was a bad night as it was." He also revealed that no one quite got where he was coming from. He was gutted and alone in his grief. When Slash was in San Francisco for work, he had a scary experience. He was momentarily dead before being brought back to life. He told The Guardian that he had vivid memories of that day. He said, "These drug dealers came to my hotel room at 5 a.m. They had everything, and I took all of it. I started down the hallway, and I ran into a maid, and I asked where the elevator was, and then bam, I collapsed. An eyewitness got really scared when she saw the musician. He was rushed to the hospital, but he said that he felt all right and left for his next performance. He explained what overdosing on drugs feels like. The musician said, "There's a certain kind of scene where everybody is just moving really quickly, and there's noise from radios and everything. I've experienced it a bunch of times." Also, Slash has seen what drugs can do to people. He lost friend and fellow musician Scott Weiland in 2015 after he died from a drug overdose. For Slash, thinking about his kids and turning his attention to music helped him quit drugs for good. Slash and David Bowie were familiar with each other for a long time. Per Rolling Stone, Slash's mom was romantically involved with the Ziggy Stardust rocker for a bit.
Had a romantic relationship, which really didn't last that long. It was probably like maybe a year and a half.
Although his mother's relationship with Bowie was short-lived, Bowie genuinely did care about Slash. According to Kerrang, when he was really struggling with addiction and started hallucinating, Bowie spoke to him and tried to help by comforting him. Bowie told him, "You're probably in a bad place right now, and you have become vulnerable to a lot of outside interaction with things that people don't normally see, and you've exposed yourself to this." Slash knew that these were wise words. Years ago, things took a scary turn when Slash found out that he had a serious heart issue. Per Yahoo Entertainment, this incident took place before Slash decided to stop relying on drugs. Doctors told him that he had congestive heart failure. The condition had been caused by his excessive consumption of drugs. Things looked grim at the time, and medical professionals thought that Slash only had a few days left. Thankfully, Slash was able to bounce back on account of physical therapy sessions. He also used a defibrillator to keep his condition in check. As a band, Guns N' Roses definitely went through lots of drug-related issues. For instance, drummer Steven Adler had 2 heart attacks, a stroke, as well as 28 overdoses. Their guitarist, Izzy Stradlin, slipped into a coma for several days, while bassist Duff McKagan almost lost his life on account of his excess alcohol consumption. If you or anyone you know is struggling with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP.
What rare and incurable disease caused Motley Crue's Mick Mars to spiral into addiction? Keep watching to find out. Mick Mars was born on April 4th, 1955 in Terre Haute, Indiana. When Mars, who was then known by his birth name Robert Deal, was just 3 years old, he saw a country music act perform at a fair in Indiana and decided that music was what he wanted to do with his life. In 2012, he told The Guardian that he immediately knew he wanted to play the guitar. "I saw this country musician play at the fair. His name was Skeeter Bond, and he had on this orange outfit with sequins all over it, and he wore this large Stetson hat, and he played guitar and sang. I said, that's what I'm doing with my life." Following the show, Mars' mother gave him an Elvis Presley haircut, the first step in becoming a rock star. Mars told Goldmine that he never wavered from following his dream. "I had every intention of being who I am today. It didn't matter how many days or years it took, or how many dues I had to pay." Fans of Motley Crue may be surprised to learn, though, that Mick Mars' early musical inspirations were not hard rock at all, but country music. Eventually, though, his musical tastes broadened, with some of his other early influences being the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and legendary surf rock guitarist Dick Dale. As a baby boomer, it's unsurprising that Mars is roughly a decade older than the rest of the crew. As a teen, Mars dropped out of high school and relocated to Los Angeles to pursue his music career, performing blues rock and working odd jobs. He even used the stage name Zorky Charlemagne in this period, as he had yet to adopt the famous Mick Mars moniker. One of Mick Mars' pre-Motley Crue projects was called White Horse. Faithfully, the members of White Horse were once described as a Motley Crue, and Mars noted the name for use in a future project. Around 1980, though, White Horse stalled out. It was then that Mars placed an ad seeking musicians for a new group. The ad read, in part, "Loud, rude, aggressive lead guitarist seeks working band." In a scene dramatized in the 2019 film The Dirt, future Motley Crue band members Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx responded. Mars knew of Vince Neil from a group Neil was playing in at the time called Rock Candy, and it was at Mars' urging that Neil join the band. And Mars wasn't just helping to form a new band, he was also forming a new identity, as he stopped going by Robert Allen Deal and instead adopted the Mick Mars pseudonym. He told Goldmine, "I was reinventing myself, things were changing, and I needed to change too." It wasn't long after Motley Crue got together before they were playing sold-out shows at Whiskey A Go-Go and the Roxy Theater, pioneering a Sunset Strip hard rock and heavy metal sound that would take off on the radio and on MTV just a few short years later. That later chart-topping success for Motley Crue was directly related to the songs Mars either wrote or co-wrote with the band, including some of Crue's most memorable material, like Girls, Girls, Girls and Dr. Feelgood, leading many music fans and critics to credit Mars as the engine behind the Sunset Strip sound. And even though he was a good deal older than the rest of the group, he didn't act like it or think like it, which he says was key to his success. He told Goldmine, "My age wasn't my age. I was 30, but I wasn't thinking like a 30-year-old. I was thinking more like a teenager. I was hungry, and I wanted to make it." Soon, Mars and the band began their meteoric rise after they performed at a major metal festival called Heavy Metal Day, and were signed to Elektra Records, who reprinted their first album. Mars told Goldmine magazine, "We started recording that just a few months after we were together." By 1984, Mick Mars' band was on top of the rock and roll world, opening for veteran heavy metal singer Ozzy Osbourne on a US tour. It was at this point, though, that the Crue reportedly considered axing their primary axeman. According to Ozzy bassist Bob Daisley, the three other members of Motley Crue conspired to get rid of Mars behind his back, with the goal of replacing him with Ozzy guitarist Jake E. Lee. But Daisley told music site Blabbermouth that he talked them out of it. I said, "Well, if you want my opinion, for what it's worth, I would say do not try to fix something that's not broken. You've got a chemistry there. You've got a functioning unit. Mick Mars is part of that. Don't f*** it up. That's my opinion. Just don't do it." And I think I saved Mick's neck that night because they were getting serious about getting someone else. Motley Crue bassist Nikki Sixx has disputed Daisley's story, saying it was completely made up, but Lee has confirmed Daisley's account. Still, Sixx clearly values Mars' friendship, as he got a tattoo of Mars on his leg.
I wanted to honor him with this portrait tattoo. I wish more people could be like Mick Mars.
Professional struggles aside, Mick Mars has also managed several mental health challenges throughout his life, as he revealed in 2001's The Dirt, Confessions of the World's Most Notorious Rock Band, a Motley Crue autobiography Mars co-wrote with the other band members. Mars wrote in the book that he has been diagnosed with schizophrenia, which, according to Psychiatry magazine, is characterized by delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, trouble with thinking, and a lack of motivation. He's also struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts. Mars also recounted a particularly harrowing experience when he was so inebriated he walked into the ocean in order to kill himself, only to wake up a short time later. When he returned to the rest of the band, he wondered if he might be a ghost. Additionally, substance use disorder has also been an ongoing challenge for the musician.
To help me get through the pain of the disease that I have, I've started taking opiates. I became dependent on them. It turned into an addiction.
But in 2012, he told The Fix that he has since gotten sober. "I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't have many vices except playing my guitar too much. I guess I'm kind of a boring guy these days. But that's how I'm going to keep going with Motley Crue as long as I can." He added that while being sober has definitely helped his musicianship, it hasn't helped his attitude. "I'm still no gentleman. I'm still as big an as ever." Substance use disorder and mental and emotional well-being are not the only life challenges managed by Mick Mars. According to Yahoo, Mick Mars was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a rare spinal disease called ankylosing spondylitis, which causes parts of a person's spine to fuse together. And in the case of Mick Mars, leads to his hunched forward appearance.
But it doesn't work on the back side of your spine, it works on the inside. So when you get the disease, you come from straight to being bent.
It also causes a great deal of pain, which Mars pushes through when he performs. He told Goldmine, "I am able to keep touring. I have days that are worse than others, and there is always some amount of pain with my hips. There are good days and bad days, but it is more of an inconvenience than anything else. I don't feel sick." The condition has also led to Mars losing several inches off his full adult height, and according to MTV, he had to have hip replacement surgery. But Mars told Goldmine that there are some unexpected benefits. "There is one thing that is cool. I ended up bent. I can always see my guitar." According to the Spondylitis Association of America, a combination of environmental and genetic factors contribute to the condition, described as a chronic form of arthritis. There is no known cure, but through early detection and treatments and therapies, progression can be slowed and the pain caused by the disease can be managed. Mick Mars met his first wife, Sharon Deal, when he was 19 and Sharon was only 16 years old. The two would go on to have 2 children together. The first, a boy, named appropriately enough Les Paul after the legendary guitar maker, and the next, a girl named Stormy. But it didn't last. Deal divorced Mars before Motley Crue, and she even had Mars thrown in jail over unpaid child support. Mars would go on to marry Motley Crue backup singer Amy Kanan, but they would divorce only 4 years later. Today, he is married to Swiss model Serena Schoenberger. Being a world-famous rock star puts a strain on a father's relationship with his children. This is particularly true in Mars' situation. His third child, Eric Deal, keeps out of the spotlight and his biological mother has not been made public. For her part, Stormy Deal, who inherited ankylosing spondylitis from her father, also keeps a low profile, while Les Paul has followed his father's footsteps to become a musician. In the early 90s, original Crue singer Vince Neil was fired from the band. Replacing Neil on vocals was John Corabi, best known for fronting The Scream. Corabi sang for Crue on their eponymous 1994 album and on a follow-up EP, but ultimately left the band during the recording of their next album, Generation Swine. Neil was brought back in to record the vocals. Although never as successful as earlier Crue records were, Mars has a special place in his heart for the one complete Crue album the band recorded with Corabi. He said, "I thought that was probably, to me, and I can only speak for me, I think that was probably the best album we've done. Musical-wise, the songs I felt were strong, and just musically, to me it was, I guess, my Beatles' White Album. That's kind of how I feel about that one. I'm not saying that any of my other albums are crummy or anything like that. I love every album that we did, but that one just has a special thing for me." Motley Crue has had an undeniable influence on generations of young musicians, none more so than John LeCompt and Rocky Gray, former members of the popular millennial-era hard rockers Evanescence. After they left the band, both LeCompt and Gray formed Machina, and their hero, Mick Mars, sat in with the group, producing a track in his home studio. Machina drummer Rocky Gray said of the experience, "To play with Motley and Nick Mars and Nikki Sixx and Vince Neil, stuff like that, it is really, really, really cool to be able to have those experiences and do that. Play those songs that you love listening to with the people that wrote them, it's awesome." Mars has also collaborated with a number of other artists as well, including Pop Evil, Papa Roach, and Hinder. Mick Mars was all for working with us, and being huge Motley Crue fans, we jumped at the opportunity. We took the song to him and he killed it. He heard the final version and said, "It was a beautiful thing." We went to his house and it was like the Batcave. Nothing but guitars and amps. He is a vampire and so are all of us. With all the time Mars has spent playing with Motley Crue, he still managed to branch out into some projects of his own. A few years ago, there were rumors of Mars working on a solo project, which he confirmed in his Goldmine interview. "Everybody is saying that I'm doing a blues record. It will be a blues record, per se, but it will be more like how Edgar Winter interprets the blues. It will have a 70s kind of feeling, but I will be writing in a more current style of music. I want to mix those two styles together." Promotional teasers released in 2016 revealed that none other than John Corabi will be appearing on at least one track. And in 2020, one of the musicians collaborating with Mars on his solo debut, Jacob Bunton, told AL that the album was almost finished. Bunton couldn't give a release date, but he did take the liberty to describe Mars' guitar playing. The power goes out, it's so loud. It's louder than anything you've ever heard in your life. Louder than a jet engine. I'm not exaggerating. He runs through so many cabinets and heads and everything, it is insane. But his tone is just the most incredible thing you've heard. The solo album, combined with a 2022 stadium tour planned with his old band, means we definitely haven't heard the last from Mick Mars or Motley Crue.
You're Mick Mars! You're Mick Mars, dude! Oh, don't forget it!
If you or anyone you know is struggling with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or call SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP-4357. Fame has proved to be a double-edged sword for Stevie Nicks, bringing with it not just fortune and recognition, but also unwanted scrutiny of her appearance, tensions with bandmates, and a serious coke addiction. Here's the untold truth of Stevie Nicks. As a child, Stevie Nicks inherited her love of music from her grandfather, who was an aspiring country singer. By 4, she was performing with him, and a 6th grade talent show cemented her dream of becoming a professional entertainer. When Nicks was a teenager, her family moved to California. One night in 1966, the high school senior went to a religious youth group meeting, where she was introduced to Lindsey Buckingham. The two played the Mamas and Papas hit California Dreamin' together, and Nicks later said she was, quote, captivated immediately. Still, they wouldn't see each other again until 2 years later, when Buckingham called her out of the blue to ask if she wanted to join a San Francisco folk group called Fritz. The band became quite successful locally, opening for Jimi Hendrix, CCR, Santana, Janis Joplin, and Grace Slick with Jefferson Airplane. Despite this, Fritz broke up in 1971. But by then, Nicks and Buckingham had become a couple, and they began to make their own music under the moniker Buckingham Nicks. Shortly after the demise of Fritz, Buckingham Nicks had written enough material to record an album. They were signed to Polydor, but their self-titled debut was a flop and the label dropped them. Undeterred, they continued to work on new songs, including future Fleetwood Mac hits Monday Morning, Rhiannon, and Landslide. Stevie Nicks was also working as a cleaner and a waitress to support the couple financially. She enjoyed the waitressing job, working lunches so she could go home and write music with Lindsey Buckingham in the evenings. But money was tight. In October 1974, she promised her father she would find a new career if they hadn't gotten anywhere with their music within 3 months. On New Year's Eve, Fleetwood Mac called Buckingham and invited him to join them on guitar. Buckingham refused to come without Nicks. After the band met, singer Christine McVie was allowed the final say over adding another woman to the ensemble. Fortunately, she said yes. They were in the band, and just in time.
The motivation stemmed out of a need to work.
In 1975, Fleetwood Mac released the self-titled album that scored them their first big break. Suddenly, Nicks found herself subject to comments about her looks. In response, the following year, she got silicone breast implants, later explaining, "I had always thought my hips were too big and that I had no chest." Nicks told People magazine that she nearly quit singing because she was tired of being fat-shamed by the media. In 1994, she had the implants removed after realizing they were causing health issues. She said, "It turned out they were totally broken." Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham's romantic relationship ended in 1976, while the new lineup was working on Rumours, their second album together. Nicks told the Oprah Winfrey Network that they, quote, had a very bad fight and she called the relationship off. They both decided to stay in the band, but it wasn't easy. At a photo shoot for the cover of Rolling Stone, sparks flew unexpectedly between Nicks and drummer Mick Fleetwood, who was in the process of getting a divorce. It eventually led to an affair, though Nicks was dating Don Henley of the Eagles at the time. Nicks later blamed heavy cocaine use for the affair, saying that it was a doomed thing that caused a lot of pain. Looking back on it though, Fleetwood had a slightly more optimistic take. He told Salon, "Me and Stevie had a moment in time when we were in love. It was never to be that it could grow and be allowed to breathe in the open." By 1979, Stevie Nicks was still in a relationship with Don Henley of the Eagles, and Fleetwood Mac were working on their follow-up to Rumours, Tusk, which came out that October. Sometime that year, Nicks discovered she was pregnant and had an abortion. Nicks stands by her choice and other people's right to choose to terminate a pregnancy. She told The Guardian that her heavy drug use would have created a bad environment for a child, and that she would have been forced to quit the band, which she believed was making music that would help a lot of people. She told ABC Downtown,
My particular mission maybe wasn't to be a mom and a wife. Maybe my particular mission was to write songs to make moms and wives feel better.
Although Fleetwood Mac had overcome broken hearts and deep-seated hurt to make Rumours, it was Tusk that temporarily split up the band. Though it sold 4 million copies, the album was still considered a commercial flop, and the year-long world tour to support it only furthered cocaine-fueled tensions. During the recording sessions for Tusk, Nicks had begun working on some new songs she decided to finish without the rest of Fleetwood Mac. She co-founded independent record label Modern Records to put out her music, and on July 27, 1981, her debut solo album, Belladonna, was released. It hit number 1 in the Billboard Albums chart and stayed in the top 200 for almost 3 years. Nicks was proud, but she later reflected that her success caused tension with many of the men in her life. When she gave Lindsey Buckingham a copy, he left it on the floor of the studio. Nicks told The Guardian, "They were full-on jealous, all of them. They hated that kind of confidence in a woman." She said that shortly after the album came out, even her father told her she would never find a man who would marry such a successful woman. Still, there are plenty of people who appreciated Nicks's music. By 2021, she had released 8 solo studio albums and 2 live albums, selling over 30 million copies. Stevie Nicks never married either of her 2 most famous boyfriends, Lindsey Buckingham and Don Henley, but she did have a brief marriage, which started and ended in 1983 and was born from a tragedy in her personal life. Around 1981, Nicks's best friend Robin Snyder was diagnosed with leukemia. She briefly went into remission and got pregnant. The father was her husband, Kim Anderson. Unfortunately, the cancer returned. Nicks told the Oprah Winfrey Network that Snyder chose not to get further treatment because she knew she was going to die, and she didn't want to take any medication that could harm her baby. In 1982, 2 days after Snyder and Anderson's son Matthew was born, Snyder died. Nicks told the Oprah Winfrey Network, "I was completely and utterly grief-stricken. I had lost the best friend I had ever had." Believing that the best way she could serve Snyder was by looking after her husband and baby, in January 1983, Nicks convinced Anderson that they should get married. She later told The Guardian, "It was a completely ridiculous thing." 3 months later, she realized they had made a mistake, and they divorced. Nicks believes Snyder's spirit visited her to tell her to end the marriage, saying, "Robin would not have wanted me to be married to a guy I didn't love." No, it's not just another rock and roll urban legend. In her biography, Stevie Nicks, Visions, Dreams, and Rumours, Zoe Howe confirmed that Stevie Nicks' prodigious cocaine use really did cause her to develop a dime-sized hole in her nasal septum, the piece of cartilage that separates the nostrils. Nicks told the Oprah Winfrey Network that she became more aware of cocaine in 1976. Overuse made her too hyped up, so she tried to counter it with alcohol use, leading to a downward spiral of addiction. She later estimated that she spent millions of dollars on drugs, telling The Telegraph, "All of us were drug addicts, but there was a point where I was the worst." In 1986, Stevie Nicks sought treatment for cocaine addiction at the famous Betty Ford Center Rehab Clinic in Palm Springs, California. After 30 days, she emerged drug-free. It didn't last, though. A psychiatrist prescribed her a tranquilizer called Klonopin, or clonazepam, to help with her alcohol addiction, and she became dependent on the drug. She also was tranquilized to the point where she lost her ambition completely. She later told The Guardian, "Klonopin took away all my wonderful drama, my tempestuousness, my compassion, my empathy, all those things that drove me to my piano." By 1993, she had also developed tremors in her hands and finally went to rehab again. This time, it took 47 days, an experience which she told Rolling Stone was, quote, "way more horrific than 30 days to get off coke." She said, "They stole my 40s. It was 8 completely wasted years of my life. Stevie Nicks' penchant for all-black outfits, flowing sleeves, fairy tales, Halloween, burning candles, and a song about a Welsh goddess named Rhiannon have seen her labeled a witchy woman. And this is not entirely wrong. One of Nicks' magical qualities is her belief that she can connect with the spirits of people she's loved and lost. For example, Nicks told The Guardian that shortly after her mom died in 2012, she felt her presence while standing in the kitchen. Moreover, she heard her mom tell her to stop drinking so much Gatorade because it was giving her acid reflux. Being a rock star, Nicks has access to some celebrity spirits, whom she turns to when she needs musical assistance. She told Variety that she still talks to her departed friends, Prince and Tom Petty, saying, "I call in all my spirits and I say, Tom, stand behind me. Prince, stand with me." Nicks' witchy reputation is so deeply embedded in pop culture that it became a plot in American Horror Story. In 3 episodes of the show, she graciously played herself, but as a full-on white witch. Playing in a band with her ex proved to be challenging for Stevie Nicks. She and Lindsey Buckingham argued over the music, and she felt he was jealous of her solo success. Things allegedly escalated to physical violence at a band meeting in 1987, when Buckingham told the others he was quitting just before a huge tour. Nicks said that she ran at him in a rage, at which point Buckingham chased her into the street and threw her up against a car. Nicks said, "I thought he was going to kill me." Buckingham left the band, and in 1990, Nicks did too. They both returned in 1996, but it wouldn't last. In 2018, it was abruptly announced that Buckingham would not be rejoining Fleetwood Mac for their upcoming tour. Buckingham later told Rolling Stone that Nicks had him kicked off the tour over a perceived insult, telling the others it was either her or him.
None of it makes sense to me. You know, Fleetwood Mac, the 5 of us together is, in my mind, is a very sacred thing.
Fleetwood Mac was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998, during a brief period where the band's classic lineup had reunited. Then, in 2019, Nicks made history when she became the first woman inducted into the Hall of Fame twice, this time for her solo career. By then, 23 men had already achieved this impressive feat, including all 4 Beatles, Dave Grohl, and Jimmy Page. At her second induction, Nicks performed alongside her, quote, very good friend, Harry Styles. She told Variety, "The only people that think it isn't a big deal are the people who don't get in." Nicks got some much-needed female company on the list in 2021, as Tina Turner and Carole King were also both inducted for the second time. Still rocking into her 70s, in 2017, Stevie Nicks told Rolling Stone that she has no plans to ever retire. However, she has had to slow down a little, thanks to some health issues and a global pandemic. In 2019, the night after performing at her second Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, Nicks was admitted to an intensive care unit in a Philadelphia hospital. She later told Variety she had suffered from low blood oxygen caused by double pneumonia, among other things. Nicks recovered, but her lungs are still compromised. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, she was particularly wary. Her main concern was her voice. She told The Guardian that her mom had been on a ventilator, which left her voice hoarse. In 2021, after recovering from a fractured kneecap, Nicks canceled 5 upcoming tour dates due to COVID fears. She wrote on Twitter, "While I'm vaccinated, at my age, I am still being extremely cautious. Here's hoping we have a chance to see her sing again soon."
The name Smokey Robinson is practically synonymous with the 60s heyday of Motown Records. As the frontman of the Miracles, his vocals led the way on many of soul music's most beloved hits. But Robinson wrote plenty of hits for other artists too, and his legacy on the music industry stretches far beyond his own songs. Here are a few things you probably don't know about the Motown great. William Robinson Jr. was named for his father, but the name by which the world would come to know him was given to him by a different family member because of a shared love of the movies. Robinson told the Los Angeles Sentinel, "My Uncle Claude was my favorite uncle. He was also my godfather. He and I were really, really close. He used to take me to see cowboy movies all the time when I was a little boy because I loved cowboy movies. He got a cowboy name for me, which was Smokey Joe."
Throughout my life, my teachers, everybody has always called me Smokey.
when I got to be about 12, they dropped the Joe off.
In his LA Sentinel interview, Robinson was asked if, as one story goes, Uncle Claude gave him the nickname to remind the fair-skinned William that he's black. His response, "I've heard that story about him giving it to me because I'm a light-skinned black man, but that's not true." Although he had been writing songs and singing with his group, the Matadors, while still in high school, Robinson had other plans for himself after graduation. He had originally thought about becoming a dentist, but balked at the idea after having to dissect animals in the 12th grade. Instead, he chose a different career path and began taking electrical engineering courses in preparation for college. To save money, he began working full-time. He later told the Austin Chronicle, "I had a job from the time I was 10 years old. I did everything, delivering papers, shining shoes, worked at the grocery store around the corner and the drugstore." When he graduated high school, he was offered a full-time spot with telegram company Western Union. Robinson explained, "Rather than going to school in September, I just waited till January so I could save up money to buy books and clothes to go to college, and it just so happens that in August, I met Berry Gordy." In August 1957, the Matadors landed an audition with Brunswick Records, otherwise known as the home of the legendary soul singer Jackie Wilson. They failed the audition, but somebody in the room liked what he had heard. Smokey later told CBN,
And he stops us. He said, "Man, where'd you get those songs from?" I said, I wrote them, man. He said, "You wrote all those songs?" Did we sang about 5 songs out of it? I said, "Yeah."
He introduced himself as Berry Gordy, the man who co-wrote most of Jackie Wilson's early hits, including Reet Petite and Lonely Teardrops. Today, Gordy is widely regarded as one of the 20th century's foremost producers and songwriters. Robinson remembered,
He said, "You got any more songs?" He never should have said that, man, because I had a loose leaf notebook that, with about 100 songs in it.
The two became friends, and the Matadors changed their name to the Miracles. In early 1959, Gordy formed Tamla Records, which later became Motown and made the Miracles one of his first signings. At their first meeting, Gordy sensed the potential in the youngster and gave him the benefit of his experience. Robinson told the Austin Chronicle the key to songwriting that Gordy imparted to him. He was told, "You've got to make a song be one idea. You've got to make it be a short book or a short movie or a short story that has a beginning, a middle, and an ending that ties it together. And even if you don't have an ending, you've got to give people enough information so they can draw their own conclusion to what happened." Smokey took that lesson to heart, and it eventually paid off with Shop Around, which he said he wrote in 30 minutes at the most. They cut it twice, first as a slow version, but when Gordy thought it needed something more, a faster version was recorded. The second take was released in October 1960 and hit the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1961, eventually peaking at number 2. It easily topped the R&B chart too, and Shop Around became the first song for the fledgling label to sell more than 1 million copies. It was far from the last. Smokey Robinson grew up at 581 Belmont Street in the North End neighborhood of Detroit, only a few doors down from the childhood home of another future Motown legend, Diana Ross. Her family eventually moved to the Brewster Douglas housing projects, where she joined a group called the Primettes, who would later become the Supremes. She then called upon her old friend to help her get a head start in the music business. Smokey explained,
She was getting ready to graduate from high school when she called me. Said she had a group. She wanted me to hear them. I heard them. The rest is history.
Despite a number of rumors to the contrary, however, Robinson has strenuously denied that the two ever dated.
So we're just close, and maybe perhaps it might have gotten misconstrued. You know?
For years, it's been widely reported that Bob Dylan, who is credited with changing the rock and roll landscape by melding the genre with spoken word poetry, said that Smokey Robinson was America's greatest living poet. But in 2011, former Motown publicist Al Abrams wrote in his book, Hype and Soul, Behind the Scenes at Motown, that he was actually the one who gave Robinson that label. As he recalled, Berry Gordy asked him to come up with a way to promote Robinson, and Abrams thought it would be a good idea to try to get the endorsement of Dylan. He asked Al Aronowitz, a music writer and friend of Dylan's, for assistance. Abrams wrote, "I asked Al if he would let me get a quote from Dylan about Smokey. Al asked me what I had in mind, and I suggested Smokey Robinson is America's greatest living poet. Al thought about it for a minute and said, 'Why bother even telling Bob? That sounds just like something he'd say anyway. Go ahead and do it. If Bob sees it in print, he'll think he said it.'" When Aretha Franklin was 4 years old, her father, Reverend C.L. Franklin, moved his family from Buffalo to Detroit after becoming the pastor of the New Bethel Baptist Church. A year or two later, Robinson, who was 8 years old at the time, befriended her brother Cecil and was invited to the Franklin home, which was only a few miles away from Robinson's. He was impressed enough by their lavish living conditions, but was more impressed still by the young girl he met that day. Robinson told Rolling Stone, "That day, Aretha couldn't have been any more than 5 or 6 years old, and she was singing a gospel song at the piano. From the time we were kids, man, Aretha could sing. She never changed. She was always Aretha." Their friendship lasted until Aretha's death in August 2018. Speaking to AARP that November, Robinson expressed regret that they had never recorded together. However, they did sing a little bit of Robinson's Ooh Baby Baby together on a 1979 episode of Soul Train. In addition to writing hits for the Miracles, Robinson also wrote hits for Mary Wells, Marvin Gaye, the Jackson 5, the Temptations, and the Marvelettes, among others. But there's one Smokey Robinson song that towers above all of them. After Mary Wells topped the charts with My Guy, Robinson flipped the gender and came up with My Girl, which he gave to the Temptations. In 2015, Smokey explained, "I wrote My Girl for David Ruffin's voice. The Temptations were so creative in making up the background vocals, all the stuff that they're singing on My Girl, they made that up themselves." But even though it's remembered as one of Motown's greatest recordings, Robinson has no problem with the song being associated with another group instead of his own. He said, "I always was so happy whenever I got a hit record on one of the artists. They were my brothers and sisters. If I could do something to enhance their careers and make things better for them, that made me happy." Even if you're not familiar with some of the songs on which Smokey Robinson has sung, there's a good chance you're familiar with some of the many cover versions he's inspired over the years. Linda Ronstadt had a pair of hits covering Robinson, for example, Ooh Baby Baby and The Tracks of My Tears, the latter of which Johnny Rivers got into the top 10 in 1967. Robinson's catalog has also been mined for hits by acts as diverse as the Rolling Stones, Hall & Oates, Otis Redding, Peter Tosh, and the Captain and Tennille. More recently, his solo hit Cruisin' topped the Billboard Adult Contemporary chart in 2000 when it was recorded by Gwyneth Paltrow and Huey Lewis for their karaoke-themed movie Duets. And not only did the Beatles record a cover of the Miracles song You've Really Got a Hold on Me, but George Harrison also penned two of his own tributes to Robinson. Ooh Baby, You Know That I Love You appeared on 1975's Extra Texture, and Pure Smokey arrived on 33 1/3 a year later. Robinson told Something Else, "That was a wonderful, flattering thing for him to feel like that and to write about it so that the world could know that he felt like that. It was wonderful to me, and I'm very flattered by that." Smokey Robinson had managed to avoid hard drugs throughout the entirety of the 60s and 70s. Although he often smoked marijuana, he didn't drink, partly because he didn't like the taste of it, and partly because he had seen the destructive effects of alcoholism in his neighborhood when he was growing up, some of which reached his own family. But After Being With You gave him another top 5 hit in 1981, Robinson, at the age of 41, found himself addicted to cocaine.
So if you do that, then you're going to suffer the consequences of what goes along with it. And I did it for 2.5 years, and I was a walking corpse.
In May 1986, a concerned friend took him to a small church in Los Angeles where the pastor explained that God had told her Robinson was coming. She then proceeded to tell him things that cocaine was doing to him, things that he hadn't spoken about to anybody else. He added, "She told me every one of them that night. She said God had showed her what was going on. Robinson never touched cocaine again." While Smokey Robinson is remembered as a recording artist, songwriter, and producer at Motown, he also helped shape the company's wider vision. In 1962, only 3 years after Berry Gordy founded the label, Robinson became its vice president, which added the role of talent scout to his duties. He remained in the position until 1988 when Motown was sold to MCA. After his 1990 album Love Smokey, Robinson left for a new label, SBK, but returned to Motown for 1999's Intimate. As a tribute to all that Gordy had done for him, Robinson and his first wife Claudette, who was also a member of the Miracles, named their son Barry and their daughter Tamla. And the feeling apparently was mutual. Looking back on their time together, Gordy told Billboard in 2017, "He was the first. My first artist at Motown, my first writer, my first producer, the one who wrote the company song that kept our mission in focus. That's why we called him the soul of Motown, and he's still my best friend."
Fans of the Foo Fighters heard tragic news this week. Just prior to the band's appearance in Bogota, Colombia on March 25th, the performance was canceled. Longtime drummer Taylor Hawkins had died earlier that day, age 50. No cause of death has yet been released, although Blabbermouth reports that he had complained of chest pains earlier in the day. A statement from the band posted on Twitter said, "The Foo Fighters family is devastated by the tragic and untimely loss of our beloved Taylor Hawkins. His musical spirit and infectious laughter will live on with all of us forever." Hawkins is survived by his wife, Allison. The couple had 3 children, said the New York Times. Hawkins was the Foo Fighters drummer, a notoriously difficult role to be in, with founder Dave Grohl being an accomplished drummer himself, noted for his work with Nirvana. Hawkins had played with the Foo Fighters since 1997, taking over for the band's first drummer, William Goldsmith, who, quote, "buckled under the pressure," as Hawkins told Beats One. Hawkins had been thriving with the world-renowned rock band. The New York Times described his style as an amalgamation of Stuart Copeland of The Police and Roger Taylor of Queen. It would have been unlikely for the Foo Fighters to recruit an unknown musician off the street to play with a superstar like Dave Grohl. That's just not something Grammy Award-winning musicians do, so they didn't. They hired Taylor Hawkins. Hawkins, born in Fort Worth, Texas, and raised in Southern California, was by no means green when he was picked up by Grohl's band. In fact, he'd played alongside Canadian-American singer-songwriter Alanis Morissette. The drummer met Morissette's manager in 1995 when he was only 23 years old, according to a 2019 interview Hawkins did with Billboard, and was invited to lay down drum tracks for Morissette's upcoming album. From then on, Hawkins would enjoy a long-lasting friendship with the renowned Canadian musician and songstress. Working with Morissette seemed to be a fond memory for the Foo Fighters drummer. He apparently enjoyed her as a boss, a friend, and an artist. Hawkins said, "As a musician, she gave all of us a lot of space. I mean, I said it before, I'll say it again. I destroyed her songs by putting all sorts of crazy drum stuff all over it, but she dug it." Hawkins ended up leaving Morissette's band after a couple of years' worth of recording and touring because, as he said on the Triple M podcast, he felt like he wasn't going to mesh well with the style Morissette was moving towards. He wanted to play harder and she wanted to mellow out. Either way, it turned out well for Hawkins. What's more stereotypically rock and roll than a drug problem? Rock stars have long maintained reputations as party animals, and it's been that way since the early days of rock music. Johnny Cash, Ozzy Osbourne, everyone from Aerosmith, Anthony Kiedis, you name it. Every era of rock had its users, and every era of rock had those who were taken early because of it. By his own admission, Taylor Hawkins almost became one of them. He told Beats One, "I wasn't like a junkie per se, but I was partying." For about a year, around the turn of the millennium, the drummer said he fell pretty hard into narcotics. Hawkins recalled being given, quote, "the wrong line with the wrong thing in it," which led to a heroin overdose that put him in a 2-week-long coma. But drugs were nothing new to the musician, as he told Kerrang. "I used to do a lot of drugs." He added, "I believe the bull myth of live hard and fast, die young. I'm not here to preach about not doing drugs because I loved doing drugs, but I just got out of control for a while and it almost got me." The 2001 overdose served as a wake-up call. Even though Hawkins said he wouldn't take any of it back, he admitted that he began spending most of his spare time mountain biking instead of getting high. The activity served as, quote, "a chance to clear your head out." It's always odd when we see musicians step into the world of film, but some of them have done it successfully, while others, like Foo Fighters' Taylor Hawkins, have but just their proverbial 15 minutes of on-screen glory. In 2013, Hawkins got the opportunity to portray the Stooges frontman and godfather of punk Iggy Pop in the film CBGB. The story doesn't revolve around Hawkins' character by any means, but it did constitute the drummer's first major role on screen. Hawkins decided against carving himself out a place in Hollywood, however, and the only other credits you can find on his IMDb page boil down to a long list of Foo Fighters video promos. Film work aside, Hawkins' death leaves a gaping chasm in not only a great band, but in the very culture of rock music itself. The Guardian wrote, "The void left by Hawkins' passing will be profound." The Associated Press quoted Dave Grohl's words about his bandmates written in Grohl's 2021 book, The Storyteller. "My best friend, a man for whom I would take a bullet. I'm grateful that we found each other in this lifetime."
Johnny Mathis sold millions of records and turned out classic soft pop singles for decades. Above all, however, he's best remembered as a musical chameleon, able to turn his hand to pretty much every genre under the sun. Here's the untold truth of one of pop music's foremost titans. You might call the genre of music for which Johnny Mathis is known traditional pop, or just plain pop, the kind of stuff sung by people like Nat King Cole or Tony Bennett, which dominated the music scene before rock and roll artists such as Elvis Presley upended things. But while Mathis is a consummate pro in his chosen style, it wasn't his first choice. He wanted to be a jazz singer, like his heroes Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, and Lena Horne. While attending San Francisco State College, Mathis sang with a jazz band in nightclubs on the weekends. A club owner invited George Avakian, head of Columbia Records' jazz department, to come hear the 19-year-old Mathis sing. By 1956, Mathis was in New York, recording his first album, the vocal jazz LP, Johnny Mathis, A New Sound in Popular Music. The album flopped, but Columbia artist and repertoire director Mitch Miller had an idea. He thought Mathis's voice was better suited to pop. Miller set up another session for Mathis, where he recorded what would become the 2-hit singles, Wonderful Wonderful and It's Not For Me to Say. Mathis has remained extremely loyal to Columbia. Apart from a brief stint with Mercury Records in the mid-60s, Mathis has made the label his professional home since 1956, and today he's by far their most experienced performer. In the 1950s and 60s, Johnny Mathis scored multiple singles on the Billboard Hot 100. Arguably, two of his best-known hits from this era are The 12th of Never and Misty. One other thing these timeless tunes have in common, Mathis wasn't particularly fond of either of them. As he once told the radio documentary series Pop Chronicles, "I didn't like The 12th of Never because it was all so repetitious and nothing seemed to happen. And I was really Joe College at that time. I was right out of college and I was hot to trot. I wanted to do something, rah, something earth-shattering." As for Misty, he hadn't even planned on recording it. The song was originally an instrumental by pianist Errol Garner, and Mathis said he'd record it if Garner wrote some accompanying lyrics. Sometime later, Garner showed up to a Mathis recording session, much to the singer's chagrin. As Mathis said, "I was just praying that he would forget about it." Greatest hits albums may be blatant cash grabs, but they've got their place regardless. They make for a great overview or introduction to an artist's work, and often rank among the best-selling albums of all time. For example, the Eagles' Their Greatest Hits is actually the top-selling LP of any kind in American history. In fact, greatest hits collections seem like such an obvious idea that it's hard to believe that anybody ever had to consciously invent them. But they did. The first greatest hits album was Johnny Mathis's 1958 collection, Johnny's Greatest Hits, released less than 2 years into the singer's career. Shortly after It's Not For Me to Say started climbing the charts, Mathis was offered a chance to tour the United Kingdom, but before he left, Columbia Records wanted him to lay down some more tracks. He didn't have time to make that happen, however, so label chief Mitch Miller had another idea: compile the singer's singles. Mathis later told Songfacts, "He threw the first 4 recordings that I did, both sides of them, and called them Johnny's Greatest Hits. That was a little flamboyant because it was not the greatest hits yet." Not only did Mathis help create a new way of selling music, but his gamble was enormously successful. Johnny's Greatest Hits spent 9.5 years on the Billboard Albums chart. Johnny Mathis was close friends with First Lady Nancy Reagan, who urged American kids to resist drugs by imploring them to just say no. She also directly helped Mathis break his dependence on alcohol. Under Reagan's direction, Mathis checked into the Havre de Grace Rehabilitation Center in Maryland.
I had 3 weeks of finding out why I drank, how I could stop. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my life.
That marked the second time Mathis fought a substance abuse issue. In the early 60s, he placed himself under the care of Dr. Max Jacobson, a classic Dr. Feelgood type who prescribed hefty doses of drugs to his celebrity clientele. Dr. Jacobson, who infamously treated JFK's back pain, utilized so-called miracle tissue regenerator treatments that included the use of amphetamines. Mathis's use of these drugs even left him hospitalized for a spell. As Mathis told Express, "I went to see him because I was doing 5 shows a night at the Copacabana in New York and got laryngitis. Everyone on Broadway went to him. He gave me vitamin shots which brought my voice back beautifully but left me with a drug addiction. It was very traumatic, but I just had to stop." By 1978, it had been 15 years since Mathis had reached the top 10, and he hadn't made the pop chart at all since early 1974. Mathis and his producer, Jack Gold, realized if they wanted Mathis to stay relevant, they'd have to stage a comeback. Luckily, Gold had heard good things about up-and-coming singer Denise Williams. Mathis later told Billboard, "We knew Denise was big in the R&B area, so I said, maybe we can get some of the R&B diehards to listen to some of my music." Williams was excited to collaborate with Mathis, but didn't think the song they'd recorded together, titled Too Much, Too Little, Too Late, was good enough for release. Indeed, the singer later told the Washington Post that they had only recorded 2 or 3 takes of the tune. But Williams was wrong. The song hit #1 in the US, a career first for both Mathis and Williams. The duo rushed into the studio to record That's What Friends Are For, an entire album of duets, which produced a minor hit in You're All I Need to Get By and led to the recording of Without Us, which would eventually become what's likely Mathis's most frequently heard song, largely because it was used as the theme song for the hit 80s sitcom Family Ties. Johnny Mathis came up in an era where being gay was not seen as okay. The idea was so widely despised that to be out and proud could quickly end a career. Still, rumors persisted about the romantic preferences of certain celebrities, including Johnny Mathis. Mathis's success was built on an ambiguous kind of sexual romanticism, and he kept his own love life extremely private. In a 1982 profile in Us Weekly, however, Mathis came out, saying, "Homosexuality is a way of life that I've grown accustomed to." The backlash was swift and frightening, and the statement was soon retracted. The singer later told the Sunday Express, "I've had a few death threats from the southern states. I'd had enough exposure and was concerned about what came with it. So Mathis cut down on pre-concert publicity in order to limit the number of hostiles who'd know about his appearances in advance. He also declined to speak on the topic of his sexuality for decades. In 2017, however, he opened up a little more during his appearance on CBS Sunday Morning.
I come from San Francisco. It's not unusual to be gay in San Francisco.
As a result, he didn't expect the kind of unfortunate backlash he received.
I thought it was maybe a little bit blown out of proportion.
On the heels of his late 70s soft rock comeback with Denise Williams, Johnny Mathis delved into the era's other dominant musical form, disco. The singer teamed up with two of the genre's luminaries, Bernard Edwards and Nile Rodgers, the writers, producers, and leaders of the legendary band Chic. The duo would ultimately help David Bowie and Diana Ross reinvent themselves as dance music performers, and they tried to do the same for Mathis with the 1981 album I Love My Lady. Sadly, upon its completion, Columbia Records basically pretended the album didn't exist. No one at the company took any steps to release it, choosing instead to send a greatest hits album to stores. In 2011, Mathis told BBC Radio 4's Front Row why he believed the album wasn't released at the time.
The record company is almighty when you're making music to sell. They have their likes and dislikes.
Luckily, I Love My Lady did finally reach fans in 2017, buried among the Voice of Romance, the Columbia Original Album Collection, a comprehensive 68-disc box set of Mathis's works. Not merely an incredible singer, Johnny Mathis is also pretty great at sports. Mathis was a standout athlete as a teenager, being a member of both the basketball and track and field teams at San Francisco's George Washington High School. Mathis was so skilled at the high jump that it earned him an athletic scholarship to San Francisco State College. He could regularly and easily clear 6 foot 5 inches, though he was a relatively short 5 feet 7 inches. Mathis's crosstown rival was 6 foot 9 inch University of San Francisco high jumper Bill Russell, who went on to win 11 NBA championships with the Boston Celtics. Nevertheless, Mathis once managed to beat Russell, clearing 6 foot 5 inches at a tournament in Nevada. All that earned Mathis an invitation to attend the 1956 Olympic trials. Although they were being held not too far from home in Berkeley, California, Mathis couldn't go. The same week he got the call from the Olympics, he was summoned to New York for his first recording session. Nevertheless, Mathis's impact on Bay Area track is still felt. The Johnny Mathis Invitational remains a major sports event in San Francisco. Johnny Mathis was a remarkable athlete as a teenager, but he didn't discover his passion for golf until adulthood, during some time off during a stand at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas in 1965. The singer is a member at 3 different golf clubs in Los Angeles and plays about 300 times a year. As he once said, "It's the only social activity I have. I have never socialized with other entertainers, but I enjoy the company of golfers." Of course, all that practice is going to make a person pretty skilled, and Mathis is indeed an excellent duffer. He played in pro-ams alongside monumental golfers like Lee Trevino and Jack Nicklaus, and took lessons from players on the PGA Tour. He got his handicap down to a 7, and he has even hit a hole-in-one on an impressive 9 separate occasions. The singer also hosted his own tournament on the senior circuit in 1985 and 1986. It's plenty normal for rich and famous celebrities to employ a private chef, if not a kitchen staff. After all, they've got the money for it, and they're often too busy to shop or cook for themselves. But Johnny Mathis isn't that kind of celebrity. Both of his parents worked as cooks in the kitchens of wealthy homes, and they passed on their skills to their son. Mathis told Southbound, "I kind of watched over them and wanted to cook." He added that he enjoys dedicating hours on end to cooking a single meal, and even does this on the road if he can. When extended stay, kitchen-enabled hotels like the Residence Inn came on the scene a few years ago, Mathis was, in his own words, over the moon. Mathis actually has an entire room in his house that serves as a cookbook library, and he once told the Times of Northwest India that his collection numbers in the thousands. As he himself says, "When I go out shopping and pass a bookstore, I always grab a couple of cookbooks." Mathis even wrote his own cookbook in 1982. Cooking for You Alone focuses on the unique challenges of preparing meals for just one person at a time, something Mathis, who lives alone, has come to perfect over the years.
What's the real story behind Dusty Hill's iconic beard? And what did he want written on his tombstone? This rock and roller from Texas lived quite the life, and this is his sharp-dressed true story. Dusty Hill and his musical co-pilot Billy Gibbons have often been mistaken for each other thanks to their epically long beards. In addition to their physical resemblance, they're also known for busting out similar basic dance moves on stage. But you can rest assured that they are in fact 2 different people. After all, Hill got his start playing music in the 60s, and his style made him a bit of an outsider in his native Texas. He played with a band called the American Blues, and the members sported long blue hair, which wasn't something you typically saw in the Lone Star State at the time. As he told The Guardian, "I got probably less about having blue hair than about having long hair because I believe they thought I was crazy. But however much crap you got about it, you got tenfold back in experience because there's so much music down there." Hill's hair wasn't the only thing that made him stand out. His mother was a fan of the blues, and Dusty followed suit, which set him apart from other white kids. When he shared his musical taste with his friends, their parents didn't exactly approve, which surprised Hill because he thought everyone listened to that kind of music. Texans are known for their love of firearms. In fact, according to Statista, in 2021, the state had the highest number of registered weapons in America, with 1,006,555 firearms. Perhaps unsurprisingly then, Dusty Hill also had a penchant for firearms, and he was even involved in an incident in 1984 in which he accidentally shot himself. After his girlfriend took off one of his boots, a Derringer handgun dropped out and accidentally discharged. The bullet hit Hill in the abdomen. He was admitted to Houston Memorial City Hospital, and doctors were able to take care of him before the bullet caused too much damage to his internal organs. Hill was embarrassed by the incident, so he couldn't quite believe that he ever did something so stupid. During a 2014 interview with Classic Rock magazine, he admitted, "I didn't really feel anything at the time. All I knew is that I had to get myself to a hospital straight away, so I got in the car and drove there. It was only when I arrived at the hospital that the seriousness of what I'd done hit me, and I went into shock." Before Dusty Hill became a bassist, he was a singer. He started performing for money when he was just 8 years old. Then, in his early teens, he was in a band with his brother who played guitar. They also had a drummer, but they lacked a bass player, so Dusty's brother suggested that he pick up the instrument, though it wasn't a very auspicious beginning. As he recalled in a 2016 interview, "It wasn't very good, but I kind of learned how to play on stage and whatnot, and embarrassment is a great motivator. If you don't play well, standing up there with lights on it really stands out, so it behooves you to get your shit up pretty quick." Hill became known for his minimalist style of playing, and he both loved and hated that people sometimes don't even notice the bass in music. According to him, that's a compliment. That means you filled in everything and it's right for the song, and you're not standing out where you don't need to be. Hill had even more to say in a 2000 interview when he called his sound, quote, "big, heavy, and a bit distorted," and compared it to farting in a trash can. Hill hated going to school as a child, and his grades were terrible as he admitted to louder sound in 2010. He was just 13 years old when he started performing in local bars, and school stood in the way of his music, which the budding musician resented. However, he wasn't completely opposed to the institution. As he recalled, "I wasn't a total loss academically. I loved history, and that's something I've kept up an interest in." Hill wasn't exactly proud of his own lack of academic achievements, but he has admitted that he had, quote, "immense pride for ZZ Top, his wife, and his family, and he enjoyed sharing his life with those he was close to." That said, it seemed like he wanted his family to take a different path than he did. In an interview with the Charlotte Observer, he revealed that his daughter Charity Hill enjoyed playing the keyboard, but instead of pursuing a music career like her father, she chose to focus on academics and go to law school. It's not uncommon for musicians to dabble in acting, and the members of ZZ Top are no exception. Dusty Hill and his bandmates have appeared in several TV shows and films over the course of their career, including the likes of 2.5 Men, King of the Hill, and The Drew Carey Show. And perhaps their most notable appearance was the sci-fi adventure sequel Back to the Future Part 3 in 1990. In the movie, the three members of ZZ Top appeared as a band playing at a festival in an Old West frontier town. Their names don't appear in the closing credits, but they were nevertheless unmistakably recognizable with their signature facial hair. Then, from 2009 to 2015, Hill and Billy Gibbons hosted several WWE Raw episodes on Monday nights. However, it was Gibbons who really got to show off his acting chops as he played Angela's father on the Fox series Bones, and he was so convincing that people reportedly thought he was the actress Michaela Conlin's actual father. In 1976, ZZ Top decided to take a break that wound up becoming a 3-year hiatus. By that time, the band had released 3 gold records and gone on several arena tours. The main reason why they shut down was because drummer Frank Beard was struggling with substance abuse. Furthermore, they were exhausted from touring so much, so taking some time off just made sense. Instead of remaining completely idle during this period, Dusty Hill got a job at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. As he admitted in an interview with Ultimate Classic Rock, "I just wanted to feel normal. I've been a singer since I was 8, and I've been a musician since I was 13, and pretty much on the road since I was 14. Hill felt that he needed to ground himself, and the airport job was the opportunity for him to do so. As he put it, "I did not want other people to think that I thought I was full of myself, but the main thing is that I didn't want to start feeling full of myself." At that point in his life, Hill's beard hadn't yet grown to its full iconic length, so it wasn't too hard for him to blend in. And when someone did recognize him, he simply denied who he was. ZZ Top is one of the world's most visually recognizable bands, thanks largely to their glorious facial hair. Ironically enough, drummer Frank Beard is the only member of the core trio who doesn't sport a beard. So what's the story behind all that facial hair? During ZZ Top's early days, Hill had a more regular length beard. And then when the band went on hiatus between 1976 and 1979, they all went their separate ways. Hill and Billy Gibbons didn't see each other for about 15 months, while the former was in Mexico and the latter was in Europe. Hill spent a lot of time in a small fishing village without electricity, so he decided to stop trimming his beard.
Dusty said, well, I'm going fishing.
As Hill recalled during an interview with Hot Press, I said to hell with trimming my beard. I mean, what for? And I came back and my beard was getting rather long, and Billy's was too. I definitely didn't think it would turn into a look. Despite the lack of planning, the beards eventually became the band's signature look, and it remained that way even after Hill's death in 2021 as the group's guitar tech Elwood Francis took over as bassist. He decided to grow a beard himself during the COVID-19 pandemic, and after lockdown, the band was pleasantly surprised by Francis's transformation. The new look also delighted fans, and in an interview with Variety, Billy Gibbons said of one show, "Everybody was just kind of giving each other the elbow, and they were pointing up and said, 'Look, the ZZ Top circus still rolls on. There's another freak up there.'" There aren't that many bands that stay together for decades without breaking up or swapping out members, but ZZ Top managed to make new music and tour regularly for over 50 years without any significant drama. With the exception of a 3-year hiatus in the 70s, they were thick as thieves and close friends for half a century, all the way until Dusty Hill's death in 2021. According to Hill, the band was frequently asked how they were able to maintain such a relationship over the years. As he revealed to the Charlotte Observer in 2015, "We got separate tour buses early on when we probably couldn't afford them. That way, we were always glad to see each other when we got to the next city."
Well, it went on and on, swear it went.
Hill also told Louder Sound in 2010 that he and his bandmates simply liked playing music together and performing on stage. They had things in common that bonded them together, but they also had differences that allowed them to have their own individual lives. As he put it, "After all this time, we all know what winds up the others and what makes them the people they are." Some people ignore their own mortality, while others ponder what might happen to them and their loved ones when they die. When Dusty Hill was asked by a journalist what he would like to have written on his tombstone, he wasn't taken aback by the question. In 2010, when he was 61 years old, he told Louder Sound, "It may sound morose, but you never get younger. I've come up with some ideas for my tombstone and then rejected them all." Hill recalled seeing a grave in the Boot Hill Cemetery that read, "Here lies Lester Moore, 4 slugs from a 44, no less, no more." The musician was amused by that inscription, but he'd yet to make a final decision for his own epitaph. Over the years, he battled health issues involving his hip and shoulders and had some ulcers, before ultimately dying in his sleep in July 2021 at the age of 72.
Seeing them in concert back in the 90s, it's sad to see them.
I saw him in the 70s
Did you really?
Michigan State Fair.
Yeah, I love that song LaGrange, it's one of my favorites.
Well, I like Legs.
When news circulated about Dusty Hill's passing, some fans were probably concerned that ZZ Top would break up. After all, Hill was an integral part of the three-piece band, so how could they go on without him? But not only did they continue to perform, they did so just 3 days after his death. This was all with Hill's permission, of course, as guitar tech Elwood Francis took his place on stage at the Tuscaloosa Amphitheater in Alabama on July 30th, 2021. After Hill's passing, Billy Gibbons told SiriusXM radio host Eddie Trunk, "As Dusty said upon his departure, let the show go on, and, with respect, we'll do well to get beyond this and honor his wishes." Hill had experienced some health issues in the years leading up to his death, and he wanted Francis to carry the torch for him. As Gibbons also revealed, Dusty emphatically grabbed my arm and said, "Give Elwood the bottom end and take it to the top." He meant it, amigo, he really did.
Both blues and rock and roll owe an enormous debt to Muddy Waters and his pioneering electric guitar work and songwriting. This is the untold truth of Muddy Waters, the father of Chicago blues. As documented in Robert Gordon's Can't Be Satisfied, The Life and Times of Muddy Waters' early years are shrouded in mystery, much of it self-created. Waters was sketchy on details in interviews, citing the year of his birth as 1915. He also told people that he was born in Rolling Fork in Sharkey County, Mississippi. In truth, Muddy Waters was born McKinley Morganfield on April 4, 1913 in Issaquah County, northwest of Rolling Fork, in a tiny community called Jugg's Corner. Although Rolling Fork was and is a small town, it was nonetheless a metropolis compared to a rural bend in the road like Jugg's Corner. Waters' father was Ollie Morganfield, an amiable, burly man who made his living as a mule skinner, hauling timber across the state to the sawmill in Vicksburg. Morganfield was also a talented musician known for livening Saturday fish fries by singing and playing the guitar. He was 21, a father, and recently separated from his wife when he met Muddy Waters' mother, Berta Grant, in the summer of 1912. Although the couple did not marry, their only son would be given his father's surname. According to Gordon, virtually nothing is known of Berta Grant. No records of either her birth or death exist, and she died shortly after giving birth to McKinley. The circumstances of her death are unknown. Young McKinley Morganfield would grow up in the care of his grandmother, 32-year-old Della Grant. Della Grant struggled raising her son and grandson on Cottonwood Plantation. Life as a sharecropper on a plantation in the early 20th century was barely a step above slavery. In exchange for a small plot of land and meager living quarters, a sharecropper was expected to work in the cotton fields from sunup to sundown. The landowner took half of the sharecropper's harvest and deducted his expenses for seed, tools, and livestock from what was left. Plantations functioned as privately owned towns, often with their own money, good only at the farm owner's store. Ultimately, the conditions on a plantation were contingent on the character of the owner. Some were good, some were bad. None were particularly fair. It was an especially hard life for a single woman raising two young boys. According to biographer Robert Gordon, Della Grant had packed up her boys and moved 80 miles north to Stoville Plantation near Clarksdale, Mississippi by 1920. Stoville's owner, Colonel Howard Stoville III, had a reputation for benevolence and generosity. Nevertheless, life remained hard for Della Grant. Little McKinley Morganfield's love of splashing in the murky and often dangerous waters around his grandmother's home earned him the childhood nickname Muddy. Stomping around in the dirty Delta water was one of the few pleasures for a child growing up on a plantation. Able-bodied children were required to work. After just 3 years of formal schooling, Muddy was forced to quit and go to work in the fields to help support his family.
Little kids, 10 years old out there working, on the farm.
Although work dominated Waters' life on Stoville Plantation, he discovered the joy of music at an early age. Della Grant made sure young Muddy attended church every Sunday. Worship was a refuge for Stoville's sharecroppers, and services were lively and filled with song. In the pews of Stoville's church, Waters discovered the power of rhythm and melody. However, it was music with distinctly different intent that really fired Muddy Waters' soul. Waters told Robert Palmer, author of Deep Blues, "The lady that lived across the field from us had a phonograph when I was a little bitty boy. She used to let us go over there all the time, and I played it night and day." Exposed to the recordings of such blues artists as Blind Lemon Jefferson, Tampa Red, and Memphis Minnie, Waters would develop a musical vocabulary and sophistication beyond that of other rural musicians. By the time Muddy Waters was a teen, music had become an all-consuming passion. When his grandmother bought her own phonograph, Waters scrounged every nickel he could find to buy records by his favorite blues artists. As detailed in Can't Be Satisfied, Waters pored over the recordings of Blind Lemon Jefferson, Charlie Patton, and Son House. At 14, Waters experienced a blues epiphany when he saw Son House play at a juke joint outside of Clarksdale. House's skill with a bottleneck slide inspired Waters to trade in his harmonica for a guitar. After some informal lessons, Waters finally bought his first guitar at 17. Waters recalled to Robert Palmer, "I sold the last horse we had, made about $15 for him, gave my grandmother $7.50, I kept $7.50 and paid about $2.50 for that guitar." Soon after buying his first guitar, Muddy Waters began playing all-night jukes around Clarksdale. Making up to $2.50 a night, Waters quickly saved up enough money to buy a new guitar, a $14 model ordered from the Sears and Roebuck catalog. From an early age, Muddy Waters knew he was meant for life beyond Stoville Plantation. Still, gig money wasn't steady, and Waters supplemented his income of 50 cents an hour from sharecropping with a number of odd and sometimes illegal jobs. As detailed in Can't Be Satisfied, Waters earned extra money as a fur trapper, selling the hides of mink, raccoons, and rabbits. Throughout his childhood, Waters earned money scrubbing bottles and selling them back to moonshiners. As a young adult, he learned to make and sell whiskey himself, an activity to which the owners of Stoville turned a blind eye. In the summer of 1941, Muddy Waters heard a rumor around Stoville that a white man was looking for him. In Waters' mind, that could mean just one thing: the authorities were onto him for bootlegging whiskey. However, Allan Lomax was no revenue agent. He was a 26-year-old ethnomusicologist on a mission from the Library of Congress to document the vanishing folk music of the American South. He had heard Waters was as good as the recently deceased bluesman Robert Johnson and wanted to record his music. Nevertheless, Waters still had his doubts about this strange white man. To establish trust, Lomax asked for some water and, to Waters' astonishment, shared it from the same cup from which he'd been drinking. In the segregated South, such an act was unthinkable. As documented in Can't Be Satisfied, Lomax set up his portable recording equipment on the porch of Waters' cabin, and with a toast of Muddy Waters moonshine, all traces of distrust melted away. Lomax recorded 2 of Waters' songs that day, Country Blues and I Be's Troubled. Muddy Waters arrived in Chicago in 1943 with a suitcase and a guitar. He went to work as a truck driver and played house parties and small clubs at night. However, the Chicago music scene was not at all what he'd expected. Waters told Peter Guralnick, author of Feel Like Going Home, Portraits in Blues and Rock and Roll, blues was dying out. There was nothing happening. It was pretty ruggish, man. Soon after arriving in Chicago, Waters' uncle Joe Brandt gave him an electric guitar. To make his mark in the big city, Muddy Waters needed to be heard over the din of crowded bars and nightclubs, and the amplified instrument was just the thing. Although T-Bone Walker had used an electric guitar as early as the 1930s, Waters' use of the instrument through a crank distorting amplifier, coupled with his signature licks, transformed the instrument from mere accompaniment to the voice of Chicago blues.
I think I'm the man that set Chicago up for the real blues.
As detailed in Peter Guralnick's Feel Like Going Home, Muddy Waters' electrified sound gained him a loyal club following, and in 1945 he caught the attention of Columbia Records. He would record songs for the label, but they were never released. Waters' recording fortune soon changed when a talent scout from Aristocrat Records heard him. After several unsuccessful records, Waters had his first hit in 1950 with Rolling Stone. Aristocrat, rechristened Chess Records, would become the leading purveyor of blues music. Just prior to the release of Rolling Stone, Waters assembled his first band. In the highly competitive world of Chicago blues clubs, Waters' group was second to none. Waters, along with guitarist Jimmy Rogers and harmonica player Little Walter, who would both become successful solo blues artists in their own right, were feared and respected on the club circuit. Waters said in Peter Guralnick's Feel Like Going Home, "I'd say back in 47 or 48, Little Walter, Jimmy Rogers, and myself, we would go around looking for bands that were playing. We called ourselves the Headhunters, cause we'd go in and if we got a chance, we were gonna burn them." In 1954, Muddy Waters had his best year ever as a recording artist. With 3 singles in Billboard's R&B Top 10, including 2 of his biggest hits, Hoochie Coochie Man and I Just Want to Make Love to You, Waters had revolutionized blues music. Yet by 1956, blues sales were in rapid decline thanks largely to the advent of rock and roll and artists such as Chuck Berry, whom Waters had referred to Chess Records just a year before. As documented in Can't Be Satisfied, Muddy Waters soon found himself resorting to local gigs to make ends meet. Although blues was in decline in the United States, British audiences were hungry for its gritty authenticity. British jazz musician Chris Barber and his band were hooked on Delta and Chicago blues and had managed to import real blues stars such as Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Sonny Terry, and Brownie McGhee for concerts in England, but landing Waters for a show was their holy grail. Expecting a rustic folk musician with an acoustic guitar, British audiences were totally unprepared for Waters' stinging electric blues when he arrived in 1958. Although some purists were turned off by Waters' wild, amplified Chicago blues, others were paying careful attention. Among this new wave of British blues devotees were Eric Clapton, Eric Burdon, and Mick Jagger, and many others who, inspired by Muddy Waters, would bring the blues back with a vengeance in the 1960s. As the 1960s unfolded, British bands like the Rolling Stones covered Waters' songs, opening his music up to a new generation of young fans. From the Animals to the Yardbirds, British blues became the sound of rock and roll in the 1960s, with loud electric guitars as its driving force. Although the emergence of rock had nearly ended his career, Muddy Waters' influence would mark its continuing evolution.
I feel like I did something for the music world.
However, an attempt to modernize and repackage Waters as a rock artist failed with the 1968 release of Electric Mud. The brainchild of Marshall Chess, son of Chess Records founder Leonard Chess, Electric Mud placed Waters and his Chicago blues in the midst of the late 60s heavy rock fuzz and psychedelic. Although Electric Mud initially sold well, it was panned by critics. No one was as hard on the experimental album as Waters himself, who said, "That Electric Mud record I did, that one was bad. But when it first came out, it started selling like wild, and then they started sending them back. They said, this can't be Muddy Waters with all this stuff going on, all this wow wow and fuzz tone." As detailed in Can't Be Satisfied, Muddy Waters appeared in what would be his last recorded performance on November 22, 1981. Taking the stage at Buddy Guy's Checkerboard Lounge, Waters was joined by the Rolling Stones, trading vocals with Mick Jagger on Hoochie Coochie Man. A frail-looking Waters nonetheless held his own with the worshipful English rocker. Shortly after the historic performance, Waters, a longtime sufferer of hypertension, collapsed. Diagnosed with cancer, he underwent surgery to remove part of his lung. Waving off chemotherapy, Waters' cancer went into remission, and he was well enough to take the stage again in late spring 1982. On June 30th, 1982, Waters surprised Eric Clapton on stage in Miami, joining him for a performance of Waters' classic Blow Wind Blow. It would be his final performance. Upon returning to his Chicago home, Waters began coughing up blood. His cancer was back, and it would worsen over the course of a year. On April 30th, 1983, just over 3 weeks after his 70th birthday, Muddy Waters died of cardiorespiratory arrest and carcinoma of the lungs.
Travis Barker, the celebrated drummer of Blink-182, has had an eventful life. He survived a plane crash and suffered horrible family tragedies. Here's the untold truth of Travis Barker. It almost seems like Travis Barker was destined to be a musician. According to his memoir, Can I Say, Living Large, Cheating Death and Drums, he was drawn to music when he was just 4 years old. In it he wrote, "My mother and father made sure I got drum lessons and took me to every single one." While his father dropped him off at the venue, Barker's mom always hung around to make sure that she recorded the session. His mom also figured out how to read music and how to hold drumsticks correctly. Barker recalled how if there was anything he couldn't figure out, he could always turn to his mom for support. Barker also revealed that he had an accident when he was a child that badly hurt his middle finger. It left his finger crooked, and his parents had to decide whether to have it straightened or leave it alone. They decided not to put Travis through more pain and left his finger crooked. It was something that turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Barker wrote, "If it had been set straight, I wouldn't be able to play drums effectively, and I would have been constantly flipping off. His finger is crooked to this day." Travis Barker lost his mom to cancer when she was still relatively young. In an interview with Vice, he said, "From the moment after my mom passed away, I really followed the last words she told me. Play the drums and don't care about anything else in life but doing the things you love." Losing his mom was a tough experience. Per an Instagram post that Barker posted on Mother's Day in 2014, he was only 13 years old at the time. His heartbreaking caption read, "She passed away the day before high school when I was 13. I was devastated to say the least and have thought about her and missed her every day since." He urged his fans to appreciate their mothers while they were still around them. Barker's post was accompanied by a photo of a back tattoo that was created as a tribute to his mother. Around 70% of Travis Barker's body is covered in ink. For him, his tattoos document his memories and reflect the tales that he has to share with the rest of the world. He revealed that he embarked on this journey when he was just 15 years old, and he remains passionate about getting inked even today.
It's all a story to me. It all tells a story. It's like a moment in time, and I got it for a reason.
He even lets his children work on his tattoos sometimes. He said, "I have this portion on my thigh where basically anytime I get tattooed, if they're around and they want to, they can grab the gun and doodle on me. It's like a sketchbook. Those are the memories that are really priceless." Barker's father wasn't supportive of his son's ink at first, but eventually warmed up to the idea, so much that he got a tattoo himself in his 60s. This was immensely satisfying for Barker, who was glad to see his father come around to the idea. As a musician and a drummer, if there's one thing that sets Travis Barker apart, it's the fact that he's willing to experiment and work with as many artists as he can. By 2021, he had already worked on at least 25 songs that year and collaborated with artists like Lil Huddy, Willow Smith, and BB Rexa. The musician doesn't get picky about the kind of artists he works with. He's made music with Wiz Khalifa and Lil Wayne, and drummed for James Arthur, Pink, and Britney Spears, among many others. Barker told Variety that when he decides to make music with someone, he puts in a lot of effort and communicates with them as much as he can, saying, "Whenever I work with someone, there's a lot of talking as well as doing that goes into it. You have to have a connection like that to warrant that trust." Travis Barker faced an unexpected setback while performing with Blink-182 in 2004 when he sustained a leg injury during a tour of Australia. Barker broke his foot in Melbourne and had to be taken to the hospital. The injury was serious enough for the band to reconsider the rest of its tour in Australia as well as Japan. Barker sustained the injury when he tripped and fell while walking to the band's tour bus, but the drummer stayed determined despite the accident. He decided to play another gig with the band in Adelaide while his right foot remained in a cast. However, it was too tricky for the drummer to continue performing. The band ultimately decided to head back home on account of Barker's health. The band only understood how serious the injury was once Barker saw a doctor in Los Angeles. Bass player Mark Hoppus told the Sydney Morning Herald, "Not only did he break his foot, but he tore his tendons and ligaments. He got the type of injury that people get in motorcycle accidents." Believe it or not, the longtime drummer of Blink-182 once starred in a reality TV show with his ex-wife Shanna Moakler. The show was called Meet the Barkers, and it followed Travis Barker and his family as they went about their everyday lives.
You guys so got me! You have no idea!
It went on for 2 seasons and had 16 episodes. One episode featured Travis Barker's birthday, which was ridiculously grand. During the episode, he received a new drum set, a gold Cadillac, and a big party. The car was eventually sold for just $12,500. Barker and Moakler's daughter, Alabama Barker, was born while the series was in production, and she featured in the last episode. One of the most traumatic experiences that Travis Barker had to live through was surviving a public and nasty breakup with his ex-wife Shanna Moakler. The couple was experiencing issues even while filming Meet the Barkers. Barker discussed his thoughts on the relationship in his memoir. The musician felt that being on a reality TV show changed his wife. He wrote, "It was turning into a variety show instead of a reality show, and in my mind, she was behaving out of character on camera, which was carrying over to her not being genuine with me. In fact, he asked for a divorce as soon as the TV show ended. However, things got out of hand and they ended up insulting each other openly." Barker accused Moakler of being unfaithful and lazy, while she said that he definitely needed help. The two briefly reconciled in 2008, but soon parted ways again. Meanwhile, the couple's custody fight got murkier in 2014, when Moakler asked a judge to reevaluate their joint custody agreement to their 2 kids. Barker maintains that Moakler loves her kids, but that she puts her own interests before them. Travis Barker was involved in a horrific plane crash in September 2008. The incident, which took place in Columbia, South Carolina, killed 4 passengers. Barker and Adam Goldstein, better known as DJ AM, were the only 2 survivors. They were hospitalized after the crash with serious burns. He told Joe Rogan, "When I jumped through the emergency exit when the plane blew up, I was in such a hurry to exit the plane, I jumped right into the jet, which is full of fuel. When I jumped into the jets, I started running. I was ripping off my clothes because that's what my instinct told me to do, but little did I know I was still on fire because I was soaked in jet fuel." It took around 11 weeks in the hospital, several surgeries, and skin grafts for Barker to physically recover. His mental health suffered as well. He spent time in therapy to deal with the post-traumatic stress. Travis Barker suffered heartbreak when his friend DJ AM died unexpectedly in 2009 of an accidental overdose. Just weeks before his death, the musician was encouraging others to avoid substances on a show called Gone Too Far. He talked openly about his issues, saying, "I owe it as a human who's sober to say something to those struggling with drugs, so that's my job. That's what I'm there for." DJ AM suffered from immense pain because of the 2008 plane crash, which he survived alongside Barker, but he eventually ended up turning to drugs to cope with his pain. Barker was heartbroken by his friend's death. In 2015, he wrote on Instagram, "Been 6 years. Not a day goes by I don't miss my homie, my mentor, one of my favorite people. Rest in power, Adam. I love you. Till we rock again." Travis Barker has suffered from chronic pain for years. He has suffered from blood clots, cellulitis, nerve damage, a staph infection, and more as a result of the crash. And mentally, it left him devastated and caused significant post-traumatic stress. He was in therapy for months to come to terms with his survivor's guilt. Barker recalled, "I couldn't walk down the street. If I saw a plane in the sky, I was determined it was going to crash, and I just didn't want to see it." Time has made a huge difference and helped the musician heal. Barker has also gotten tattoos as a tribute to those who died in the crash. Unfortunately, he was also involved in a road accident when a bus hit his car in California. Barker has suffered over the years, but has said that he remained comfortable with the idea of touring. Another thing that changed for Travis Barker after the plane crash was that he decided to become healthier in as many ways as possible. The musician told Vice, "After the accident, my kids were so important to me. I came so close to death that I realized there was no way I was going to up a second chance at life." He also mentioned that the pain medication that he had to take after the plane crash led him to quitting substances for good. As the drugs became stronger, the realization that he needed to quit them became apparent. Ultimately, he stopped taking all drugs.
I haven't had anything for 10 years.
Nothing.
According to Men's Journal, Barker also decided to switch to veganism after the plane crash. He explained, "Honestly, ever since I found this way of eating, I have endless amounts of energy. I can go all day, and after it all, I never find myself getting tired." Barker also made regular workouts a part of his routine, trying new circuits in boxing. Travis Barker values his role as a father. He told Vice, Man, I would get in a plane crash again. I would battle an army. For my kids and my family, there's nothing I wouldn't do. Barker has always wanted to be present in his kids' lives. He says that this is something he can appreciate because he lost his mom at an early age. He reflected, "I had a rough childhood, you know what I mean? But it made me strong. I want certain things for my children. I just want to be in their life." Also, as far as Barker is concerned, his kids are a source of strength. They've helped him stay on track over the years, something that he doesn't hesitate to acknowledge and be grateful for. He commented, I still think, what did I do to deserve these beautiful and amazing kids?" Travis Barker has been friends with Kourtney Kardashian for years, but in early 2021, a rumor surfaced that suggested that their relationship had become something more. The two confirmed that they are dating in February 2021, and the drummer later told Billboard that being with Kardashian has been a learning experience. He explained that in his previous relationships, his exes didn't have kids and wondered why he couldn't be around for them a lot more. Things are different with Kardashian, who has 3 kids of her own. Barker explained, "I'm spending time with a woman who's a great mom, who's a great friend, and you don't have to worry about any of those things. It just comes natural." Meanwhile, Barker's ex-wife Shanna Moakler isn't pleased with their relationship and has accused the Kardashians of creating a rift in her family. She told TMZ, "My family's broken because of this family, the Kardashians, and now my kids and I are alienated from each other because of another sister in the family." For their part, the newly married Barker and Kardashian seem like a happy couple and will hopefully stay that way for years to come. If you or anyone you know is struggling with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP 4357.
Nine Inch Nails emerged in the late 80s by offering something completely different from the shiny radio pop of the day. Millions of fans found a kindred spirit in frontman Trent Reznor and his emotionally intimate songs. Keep watching to discover what you may not have known about him. As the chief creative mind behind Nine Inch Nails, Reznor became one of the coolest and edgiest musicians of the 90s, an era positively lousy with cool and edgy rock stars. But everybody's got to start somewhere, and Reznor's first forays into music were decidedly not as unassailably hip as stuff like March of the Pigs or The Perfect Drug. After his parents divorced when he was 6, he was raised by his maternal grandparents just outside of Pittsburgh. In 1995, his grandfather, Bill Clark, told People magazine that Reznor was a good kid who spent his time fishing, skateboarding, constructing model planes, and playing the piano. His childhood piano teacher likened his jaunty playing to that of Harry Connick Jr. That musical foundation paid off in school as Reznor played tenor saxophone and keyboards for the jazz and marching bands. He was also a good enough musical theater performer for his classmates to name him Best in Drama. His roles included Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar and Professor Harold Hill in The Music Man. As a teenager, Reznor already had a gift for music, including an aptitude for the keyboard. Luckily for him, when he graduated from high school in 1983, synth-driven new wave was all the rage. That gave him the chance to really go places with his band at the time, Option 30. Far from the dark industrial sounds of Nine Inch Nails, Option 30 was primarily a bright and sunny pop group. Reznor played synths and occasionally sang. Around that same time, he also played keyboard for a Midwestern synth pop band called Exotic Birds, although he departed after recording just one EP. A few years later, he jumped into a band with a higher profile, although it was a fictional one, as he landed a bit part in the movie Light of Day, a 1987 drama starring Michael J. Fox and Joan Jett as bar musicians. Just 2 years after playing in this fake band, he would release the first Nine Inch Nails album. After studying computer engineering at Allegheny College for a year, Reznor moved to Cleveland and paid the bills with a job adjacent to the music industry. He worked as a handyman for Right Track, a recording studio later renamed Midtown Recording. He applied the precision and attention to detail that he's famous for to his work as he kept the place in order. In 1995, Midtown owner Bart Coster told People magazine, "When that guy waxed the floor, it looked great." Reznor was really there for a fringe benefit, as Coster let him have free range of the studio during unbooked hours. A lot of those sessions were spent just figuring out how to use all the production gear. As Reznor told Kerrang in 2005, "I'd spent time at night learning how to record and engineer things, and I tried to work out how my voice sounded. I was playing everything myself." It was during those studio downtimes that Reznor recorded Pretty Hate Machine, the first Nine Inch Nails album, which reached stores in 1989 and boasted the hit single Head Like a Hole, a song that Reznor says took him just 15 minutes to write. As he recalled, the fact that it produced this huge reaction really pissed me off because I hadn't agonized over it. The first single off Pretty Hate Machine was Down in It, and Reznor hired visual artists Benjamin Stokes and Eric Zimmerman to make a music video for it. The concept for the video was that Reznor would be pursued through Chicago, then fall off a building and play dead on the ground, splattered in blood. Since the directors didn't have the money for a crane shot of a dead Reznor, they tied a camera to some weather balloons, but then the wind carried the makeshift apparatus to parts unknown. So the video was completed and released without that final shot. Meanwhile, around the time of the shoot, a Super 8 camera attached to weather balloons landed on Robert Reed's farm outside Burr Oak, Michigan, more than 100 miles away from Chicago. Reed turned it over to authorities, who found grisly footage of what looked like someone being killed. The FBI eventually took over the case. After about a year of investigating with little progress, the Bureau sent out flyers to Chicago area schools to solicit tips. Eventually, an art student saw the Down in It video on MTV and recognized the imagery from a flyer he'd seen at school. Soon afterwards, Reznor finally got the opportunity to explain the whole situation to the authorities. In 1992, Nine Inch Nails released Broken, an EP of brutal industrial metal. Reznor commissioned a promotional mini-movie that was also called Broken. The uncut version of that film has only ever been seen by very few individuals. Reznor hired visual artist Peter Christopherson to make a horror movie that felt real, like a snuff film. He delivered, producing a 20-minute movie that included an individual being drowned, a shot of a man preparing for his hanging, and another man being kidnapped and held hostage in a basement. Topping it all was a clip set to the song Happiness and Slavery, featuring self-harm inflicting performance artist Bob Flanagan getting tortured by a machine and ground into meat. Even Reznor found the whole project to be too extreme and over the top, and he thus never commercially released it. He did, however, make some VHS copies for a few friends, some of which were bootlegged and discreetly traded. Happiness and Slavery showed up on a 1997 Nine Inch Nails music video compilation, but Broken in full remained a mysterious artifact. However, in 2006 it showed up on illegal download sites, and in 2013 it appeared on Nine Inch Nails' Tumblr page after it was posted on Vimeo. The release was brief though. Within a few hours, Vimeo banned it for violating its excessive violence guidelines. One of the singles off of Nine Inch Nails' 1994 album The Downward Spiral was Hurt, a slow, emotional ballad about inner pain that sounded very different from March of the Pigs and Closer, two of the singles that preceded it. But the original version of Hurt has been overshadowed ever since the legendary Johnny Cash recorded a stark, stripped-down cover of it in 2002, just a year before he died. Producer Rick Rubin asked for Reznor's blessing in advance of Cash's take, but then the Nine Inch Nails leader received a demo. In 2002, he told The Sun, "I listened to it and it was very strange. It was this other person inhabiting my most personal song. Hearing it was like someone kissing your girlfriend. It felt invasive." Reznor eventually got over those feelings, though. As he put it, having Johnny Cash, one of the greatest singer-songwriters of all time, want to cover your song, that's something that matters to me. It's not so much what other people think, but the honor that this guy felt it was worthy of interpreting. In 1997, two of the 20th century's most prominent experimental musicians collaborated when Trent Reznor and David Bowie teamed up for a twisty electro-pop song called I'm Afraid of Americans. That came after Reznor remixed The Heart's Filthy Lesson, which Bowie released in 1995, the same year that Nine Inch Nails opened for Bowie on his Outside tour. It was also during that time that Reznor found himself uneasy with sudden, massive success. In 2016, in the wake of Bowie's passing, Reznor told Rolling Stone, "My way of dealing with life was to numb myself with drugs and alcohol." He knew that he was on a self-destructive path, but when he met Bowie, who had also been through the ups and downs of fame, he saw someone who was at peace with himself. The older rocker imparted guidance and advice. One thing in particular that Bowie said that stuck with Reznor was, "You know, there is a better way here, and it doesn't have to end in despair or in death, in the bottom." Reznor hit bottom about a year later, but then got sober, and sometime after he tried to thank Bowie for all he did. As he recalled, "I started to say, hey, listen, I've been clear for," I don't even think I finished the sentence. I got a big hug and he said, I knew you'd do that. I knew you'd come out of that.
There's kind of one pivotal point where we both seem to have the same sensibility.
One of the biggest rock albums of 2005 was Nine Inch Nails' With Teeth. It was the group's fourth album overall and first in 6 years. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard album chart and spawned 3 number 1 alternative rock radio hits: The Hand That Feeds, Only, and Every Day Is Exactly the Same. So it was no surprise when the band received an invitation to perform at that year's MTV Movie Awards. They accepted the offer, but then withdrew in late May, about a week before the show. Reznor planned to perform The Hand That Feeds while flanked with a photo of President George W. Bush, which the network took issue with. Reznor wrote on Nine Inch Nails' website at the time, "Apparently, the image of our president is as offensive to MTV as it is to me." As for the network, a spokesperson said in a statement, "While we respect Nine Inch Nails' point of view, we were uncomfortable with their performance being built around a partisan political statement." Nine Inch Nails has never been a media-friendly pop act, what with their many loud and angry songs about death, mental illness, and social decay, but the world has nevertheless embraced them. They've sold millions of records and received some of the music industry's highest accolades. Some of that is fine with Reznor, but some of it isn't. In 2011, he mused to The Hollywood Reporter, "Why don't the Grammys matter? Because it feels rigged and cheap, like a popularity contest that the Insiders Club has decided." That same year, he won an Academy Award along with Atticus Ross for the original score they composed for The Social Network, but he apparently holds the Oscars in much higher esteem than the Grammys. As he told The Hollywood Reporter, "The movie side is interesting, challenging, different, and rewarding in ways that I hadn't experienced through my music career." He told DP30,
"I'd always been interested in the idea of scoring film, but I hadn't made any real inroads to. That was one of the things on that pile that I was going to get to."
Reznor was similarly pleased in 2020 when Nine Inch Nails were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, an organization that the city of Cleveland made a play to host back when Reznor worked in a drum machine store. As he told Rolling Stone, "It's crazy to think all these years later that, wow, against all odds, I wound up as a part of that." Shortly after the 2007 release of the Nine Inch Nails album Year Zero, Reznor wrote a blog post aimed at Universal Music Group, the parent company of his label Interscope Records. He took Universal to task for what he considered an absurd price for the album in Australia. While other major releases ran about $21.99 in Australian dollars, Year Zero cost $34.99. So Reznor wrote, "When I asked a label rep about this, his response was, 'It's because we know you have a real core audience that will pay whatever it costs when you put something out. You know, true fans. It's the pop stuff we have to discount to get people to buy. So I guess as a reward for being a true fan, you get ripped off.'" At a concert in Australia a few months later, Reznor ranted against Universal a bit more before offering a unique solution to his overcharged fans, as he declared, "Has anyone seen the price come down? Okay, well, you know what that means. Steal it. Steal away. Steal and steal and steal some more and give it to all your friends and keep on stealing." Reznor subsequently parted ways with Interscope and Universal, and in 2008 he self-released the Nine Inch Nails albums Ghosts 1 through 4 and The Slip. Deluxe physical versions of both projects were available for a fee, but otherwise, fans could download them for free.
For us, it's always about trying to find truth and be as honest with who we are.